comments they received from them. And we'll take board comments and questions. Alex?
Right.
First, I'd like to introduce my replacement. Dave Heinrich. Remember, you approved the new position last year, and Dave Heinrich, we're giving him the title civil engineer, so he's going to be involved in this project. And his official start date is around 1st of May, but he's been coming to these meetings. So,
Welcome, thanks, and no, he can't be the replacement.
So as you recall, we had a work session a while back, I think in February, and we brought 4 options for access for the southern part of Superior. And at that time, we were dealing with the access situation and whether to build another bridge, whether to have access off of McCaslin and so forth. The other part of that was floodplain mitigation. And so we scheduled a meeting with a community meeting to go out to the public to give them some concepts for replacing the 2nd Avenue Bridge and for channelization improvements to move towards taking all the properties out of the floodplain. So as you recall, the study area we're looking at is kind of bounded by McCaslin. Anything east of McCaslin will be taken care of with the Superior Town Center as that moves forward. So it really limits our McCaslin, and then going back to the town limits. Here's Cold Creek flowing through original Superior, and the southern part of Superior only has one access to get out of that community by means of the 2nd Avenue Bridge. There used to be culverts or a small bridge structure on 3rd Avenue, and we debated whether to also include 3rd Avenue as a option. Going back on the floodplain, the FEMA study several years ago adopted a floodplain, and that is the regulatory floodplain that was just recently updated in December. There was a Cold Creek master plan that took place in 2006, but we've been working on this stretch since 2010 in terms of what to do for mitigation. Also, what's going on now is a Cold Creek, Rock Creek master drainage way plan, and that study will be coming back, implementing some of the recommendations from this study and changing the floodplain as we go forward. So in a couple of years, FEMA will change the floodplain based on this new Rock Creek, Cold Creek master drainage way plan, as well as this mitigation study. So this is the floodplain for Cold Creek, and you can see lined in red the structures that are in the floodplain currently, and we're looking at options for how do we take those structures out of the floodplain. The flooding causes. Where's Lisa? The 2nd Avenue Bridge has limited flood capacity. It can't pass the 100-year storm, and so water backs up or overflows 2nd Avenue, and then the portion of Cold Creek upstream of 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenues has limited flood capacity, and so the flood overspills the banks and floods other properties. Also down by the open space area, there's split flows because of the railroad embankment. That's the old railroad embankment that was constructed there, and there's areas where it goes through the embankment and splits the flows. Did I move it? Okay. These are some pictures that were taken last year, some of the vegetation and so forth that is located in the channel that kind of restricts flow. So one of the ideas is to remove some of that vegetation. So some of the flood reduction options are to increase the capacity of the 2nd Avenue Bridge, either by replacement or widening, increase the capacity of the channel, through channelization and capture and redirect some of the split flows. Back in February, we had a number of options that we came to you. We had 4 options in terms of whether we replace the 2nd Avenue Bridge, build a new 3rd Avenue Bridge, or build both. We also talked about other access options to the southern part of Superior. Consensus at that time from the town board was to replace the 2nd Avenue Bridge in the short term and maybe consider down the road 3rd Avenue Bridge. That's a consensus that we had heard at that meeting. So this graphic kind of shows you we've been working a little bit more on we do channelization of the creek. What would be the limits of the construction, and how would that impact some of the properties and property owners? So we took that out to the community on April 4th. We scheduled a community meeting, invited people. We notified all the property owners by mail and by hand-delivered flyer of the meeting. We had about 15 people show up for that. We had a number of questions and comments, which I summarized in a memo that I included in your packet. And there are people here tonight that will speak to their specific concerns. Here's the 2nd Avenue Bridge at present, and one of the comments was how wide is the new bridge going to be, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is the 3rd Avenue looking south to Charles, and whether that should be disconnected, we'll talk about that. This is 3rd Avenue looking north. So here's, again, the limits of construction. I'm going to show you cross-sections looking at each of these points to show you what some of the channelization improvements would look like. So this is a first slide. We go back to this section. This is cross-section 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so this is what it looks like today. And if you see this dotted line, that's if you're looking down the channel, that's kind of the section, what the current topography looks like. The solid line would be after channelization, where we remove some of the debris and soil out of here to make the channel wider so we can carry more flows. So that's the area here, and you can see we have slopes cut back. We don't have walls in this particular area. We'll talk again about maintenance. Here we provide a bench for possible maintenance access along the creek channel, so we can get equipment down there to maintain the channel after we improve it. We want to keep it free of debris, so that'll be a major issue that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. This particular section is right through. This is probably our most constricted section of the channel near 3rd Avenue. And so in this particular area, we may have to go with a wall section. You see this vertical slope would be the new channel. And this particular area, because it's so tight, we may end up putting a wall in here so we can get the additional capacity. We don't have room because there's a house right here, so we can't really take that slope up because we'd be affecting a house. So we would have to put a wall in there so to leave the house in place and to protect that and provide enough carrying capacity for the channel. The next section is right at the 2nd Avenue Bridge. So this is the channel, and the bridge is right in this particular area. We would actually move the channel slightly to the north and provide a wider opening. We're proposing here concrete box culverts. We'd like your input, whether that we'd like to. What's good about that is that we don't need as much freeboard, and we can make a lower crossing. If you want a bridge structure, we would have to raise the profile of the road a little higher. So we'd like your input on that, whether to raise the road and build an actual bridge, or to build box culverts and keep the bridge at the same level. So there's some design aspects there. The box culvert is probably a little cheaper. The bridge, from the creek standpoint, would be probably more aesthetically pleasing. So that's a design issue that, as we go forward, we'd like your input.
Alex, when you say a little bit cheaper, what do you mean? How much is a little bit cheaper?
What do you think is pretty substantial? 20%. maybe? Yeah, 20 to 30% cheaper. So, I mean, right now, we're heading towards the box culvert, scenario, and bringing it out at the lowest cost. But if you want us to look at a bridge, we can certainly carry that through the design process and then give you a comparison of the cost.
When you have a box culvert in there, don't you stand the chance of having more debris kind of hang up in there, like tree branches and that kind of thing?
Right, and you probably provide a little bit additional capacity. I think with the bridge, you have to provide more freeboards to protect the bridge, so you don't have the debris catching. You don't have to do
A lot of it's the section of the bridge, steeper.
steeper with the bridge, yeah. But we'll bring those answers as we go forward to the design process. And then this is the section near First Avenue, and we're laying the slopes back and providing kind of a wider section in this particular area. These are some shots of typical urban drainage channels where they've gone through and done a channelization project. And you can see in this area, a lot of the vegetation is gone. They've tried to save stands of trees, but in terms of the tree issue, they're committed to replacing as many trees as they take out. And it's probably going to be a different species and a different location, but they're concerned for the trees. But right now, it's kind of haphazard, it's overgrown, and they're going to clean it up and get trees that are appropriate for the channel. So this is kind of an area, this is a typical drop structure they could build, and we may have one or more in this particular area. This is an example of a 5-cell box culvert installation. This is, I think, by Foothills Parkway in Boulder. And in this case here, they do have a trail, so the trail is elevated a little higher, so it doesn't flood out during the low storms. But during a major storm, there would be water flowing through there.
Alex, was this kind of thing presented to residents of the
Yes.
original town, and what was the feedback on having that?
Feedback on this?
Yeah.
Well, we'll hear from some of them, but I don't think they really cared whether it's a bridge or a box culvert. I mean, I think their feeling was leave the same profile as you have now. They were concerned about the width of the Second Avenue, how wide it's going to be in terms of the roadway. Didn't have much feedback I remember on that.
Hey, Alex, are there more than two ways to do this bridge other than this culvert, this multi-cell box culvert, and then what you're calling a raised bridge? Are there other ways to engineer it?
I suppose you can have a combination, but those are two of the basic, either a bridge or box culverts. I mean, box culverts are usually cheaper. A bridge is probably more substantially, more expensive because you're spanning a larger length of creek bed.
Because I'm concerned about this design for a number of reasons. One, it seems to me like it would be a nice place for a homeless person to sleep in. And the reason, I mean, I ride my bike all through Boulder under these kinds of things, and it is very scary to go through them because there is always somebody sleeping in these, always. So I'm hesitant on that, especially if it's bordering private property, people's homes and stuff. I would not feel that that would be safe. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling, I like the aesthetics for a bridge and the wider opening, but the trade-off is a little higher cost.
Yeah, I'm not real fond of the look of those. It just doesn't look...
Why don't we plow through your, looks like you're getting close to the end of your presentation.
Sure. Access through the channel, and that was a very heated topic, and a lot of basically all the people there said we don't want public access. I think they're okay with urban drainage being able to get down to the creek, getting their equipment and maintaining it, but they didn't want a trail or public going through their property, right next to their property. So that's going to be something we'd like your feedback on, and certainly we heard from the residents there that they don't want public access. They just want urban drainage to get there to maintain. So here's some of the comments. There are more comments that were listed in the memo and some of the responses. The width of the bridge should match the street north of the creek, and I wanted to give you a graphic here of what would build. Here's the bridge. It's approximately 24 feet wide, the actual bridge. North of, when you get into the original Superior, with the pavement is actually about 35 feet plus the pans on each side. And then south of the bridge, there's curb and gutter section, and it's approximately 30 feet. So there's some discrepancies about what the section should be. This is what our initial proposal would be a 32-foot curb-to-curb section, basically providing for 2 travel lanes and maybe bike lanes on either side, and then attached walks on the bridge. So that's our initial section. We'd like feedback from you about what to include, but that's kind of what our first take on it. And this would be a little less than what's north. North is about 35 feet wide, and then south is 30 feet wide. So this is kind of a compromise between the 2 sections. This connection, I'll tell you what that. Okay. So here we have Charles. So the third comes down and makes this kind of funky turn into Charles. And because this was the tightest constriction, we are evaluating whether to take this connection out and providing more room for us to expand the channel so we can move it this way and not impact the property on the other side. There are some difficulties, because how do you provide a turnaround? And when you look at a turnaround or some other method of handling that, you probably get a lot more pavement that could have impacts on the property. We're meeting with these property owners to see how they feel about it and whether they would support a disconnection at this point. We really don't know which way we're going to go on this. But
What does disconnection mean? No access?
Well, here, right. You maybe put a bulb or turn it on here, take the pavement out in this section here, and provide this area for expanding the channel to this side onto where the area where the pavement is now. So you wouldn't be able to drive this way. And this is a section of road that serves, just a few property owners. We're not saying we're going to make the disconnection. We're just going to explore it, see what the property owners feel about it. Our initial evaluation when we looked at this, well, how are we going to provide a turnaround at the end of these things? And it became so much pavement that it didn't seem like it would be worth the effort to do it. So that's our initial take. We're not sure what to even pursue it, but we're going to meet with the property owners on it. Okay, so there's a resident south of the creek near 3rd that was very opposed to the 3rd Avenue Bridge. It was resident. I think George is going to support the 3rd Avenue Bridge. He's going to get up and give you his opinion. Don't provide public access along the creek. There was a lot of concerns about removing a lot of trees in the channel, concerns about migratory owls and other birds that nest in those trees. So those are some of the comments. A lot of comments were, hey, this is impacting our property. We want to know more about it, where this construction limit is going to go. And so we're going to be meeting with all affected property owners, look at their property, look at what we could do, and how to, maneuver that line to create as least of impact on their particular property. So we have this work session. What we're doing tonight is just checking in. We've gone out to the community. We got their comments. If you decide to give us the go-ahead, we'll keep going on this. We'll meet with the individual property owners, try to refine the concepts. We'll work with urban drainage to actually get a design engineer to start the actual design of the channel improvements, the actual design of the bridge, and then come back in October when we have a more solid plan. Right now, it's very preliminary, very conceptual in nature. Go to the planning commission, come back to the town board approval, and then we'll be finalizing our design after we get your approval in October, finalize the design, and then start construction next year. Again, this is trying to get to a new bridge by next May or June before flood season next year. So that's why we're pushing this. So for that, and there's people here that knew about this work session, they'd like to give you some of their input.
Great, so I think maybe the best would be to see if the board has questions, and then we could express opinions about it, and then have public input about it, and then some final direction, or preliminary final direction.
So, down the road, I'd like to see some comparative costs between the box culvert and a bridge,
Okay.
including maintenance costs.
Sure.
Is one more expensive than the other to maintain as well?
Okay, so you'd like to see us develop both concepts and come back with...
Yeah, I mean, you say one's cheaper, but how much cheaper? And the other question, currently there's no public access along the creek. Right. That's all I have.
Good, so.
So when you do that, I'm also really interested in the difference in how easily a bridge washes out. A box culvert looks more sturdy to me, but that's totally, I know nothing about engineering, so it seems like it would be a lower probability of washing out, but I'd love to know those kind of statistics from you when you're working on it. And that was the only comment of the public hearing or the citizen comments that gave me heartburn, was the one about no public access. I think if we have a creek, we should enjoy it, and so that one gave me heartburn. So the rest of them.
It's hard to judge property lines there, so that's a factor in anything.
Yeah, I mean, just growing up in Southern California, I've lived through floods, and very close to our home, we're evacuated, we've seen bridges wash away. To me, the box culverts accumulate debris. And, I mean, I've seen cars, swept away in front of my eyes, and so the water obviously goes over the bridge eventually or washes away the bridge. So it's important to see the difference in price, but I'm leaning more towards an actual bridge aesthetically, and again, like Lisa, I'm not an expert either, just...
We
I just want to know the chances of washing out.
We have box culverts at Colton and also on Rock Creek Parkway, down by Safeway, box culverts.
The other question is, since we haven't had open to public access, why would we entertain that now, especially if it impacts somebody's property? What was the idea behind that?
It's a creek.
Yeah.
It's the what?
Yeah,
I want to be able to
it's a
walk around the
creek,
creek.
and, we're always talking about new pedestrian connections, trail connections, and different ways to make those connections, different opportunities, so it's just something that we look
Yeah,
at.
we can't walk along the
I
creek.
just want to know where that came from.
Okay.
Well, one way to assuage all of our one way to deal with this is in the town center development where Coal Creek goes through. My understanding is that at least the plan we saw was going to have some sort of at least partially manicured creek side throughout town center that is there for public use. So, if that's done the way that we go down to Boulder Creek,
Yeah.
quite a bit to the farmer's market, and then we walk next to that public accessible part of Boulder Creek, and that's enough for us. It doesn't need to go the full length of Boulder Creek to make us happy, but the town center and the way Coal Creek will navigate its way through, to me, opens up that Coal Creek corridor to the general public, and to me makes it, I'm going to have a hard time taking away private property to have access to the creek when we have public access in town center. But if you can put that slide back up that shows the creek and where the current creek bed now is and how it encroaches on the property to the, I think, the north. So if you go back to the previous one that you just had up there, if I look at the darker gray line meandering through, in some places, you go quite a bit north of that than what we have now, right? And now, is that all private property? And so somebody's going to have to give that all up, correct?
The red line. Right.
You know, and how do we intend to acquire that property?
I mean, that's another discussion item that we should have, is that our intent was to go in and get the right of access onto their property in order for the channelization improvements. So we'd have to negotiate with them. That was a question that came up with at the community meeting. You know, are you going to buy it, or are you going to, you know, my feeling initially is that this is a public project that's benefiting their property, taking their property out of the floodplain. So it's a mutual type of agreement. We're spending public dollars benefiting their property, so hopefully they would be cooperative in allowing us to do that. If we have an uncooperative property owner, then we have to figure out what our strategy would be. Do we just stop the project, not touch it, or do we use some other mechanism?
In your opinion, which properties are most affected by the new boundaries of the red lines there?
It's hard. I mean, the Rogers property has a bunch. You know, that's the biggest. This is a big property here, and their property owners are represented.
Okay.
They'll talk to you. So those are the two biggest, but I'm not familiar with all the properties to give you that. Okay. And getting back to your question about public access, I think it was urban drainage really said, look, we do this all over, and when we do these channel improvements, we really provide an amenity for the public. And this is, you should at least talk about this, whether you want public access or not. And you just read in the papers over the weekend, another section of Cold Creek Trail is being completed. So this is a 26-mile long corridor of trails and using the creek areas. So now is the appropriate time to consider whether you want to do this or not.
I was okay having the discussion. I was just wondering where it came from, that's all.
Yeah, and it was urban drainage and, Cold Creek's an amenity, and should the general population want to use it, but there's always trade-offs because people don't want these bike paths in their backyard. I mean, there's a public nuisance because they're traveling through there where they weren't before.
It's not taking more property, though, because it's just part of the flood.
So
I think
I'm wondering how much property really needs to be acquired to make this successful? Is there studies on how much channelization you need to do and how much property you need to acquire to create that?
Well, I mean,
So is this an arbitrary amount, or is there a reason?
This is our the red lines here, our initial take on how much land we need. Now, again, whether we acquire, maybe we're just acquiring an access easement, an easement to go in and maintain. It's still their property. All we're doing is we want the right periodically to go in and maintain the improvements that we're going to build. We're going to build some improvements, do some channelization work, and have the right to go back in there and maintain those periodically.
So
It would still be privately owned. We would just have an easement to do that.
So again, I'm wondering if there's studies that determine how much property is really needed to do this kind of project. So I'm hoping to get some data, not just an arbitrary line, red line.
Well, I mean, in the final design, that's when you'll know. I mean, engineering's going to dictate what they need and what they don't need.
And the thought here is to go out and meet with the property owners, see what the impacts are. Can we move the line to the other side of the creek? It's like you got to have so much capacity. There are opportunities on one side or the other to provide that capacity. What is really valuable to them, and what can we touch or not?
Can capacity be gained by depth as well as width?
Put vertical walls. There's a number of things we could do, and there's a lot of permutations here. This is one, and by meeting with them and finding out what's really important to them and what we can do engineering-wise, and then if we do that, it doesn't affect anybody else. So it's that iteration process that we go through as we do the design.
So thanks for all your hard work. I just had a couple. So when will there be an arborist that actually goes out and identifies the trees that will be removed? Or
Yes,
how
there's
does
a
that
whole
process?
environmental component of it. It's not only the trees, but all the wildlife, anything that we do that's going to affect wildlife and the environment. We'll have an environmental study done for that, and an arborist, whatever needs to be done to quantify all those impacts.
Okay. And you mentioned that some wall structures might need to be built in a couple of locations. Are you anticipating those are concrete or are those boulders? Do you have an idea of what that might mean?
There will be probably a couple of concrete walls just in that one area that I showed you, because that house is so close, and we have to protect, we don't want to undermine the slope and affect that house. So there's one or two like that, where we have to have some kind of wall structure to make sure that the channel work doesn't affect, undermining their property.
Okay. And you went through the diagram of the bridge, and have you selected to keep you haven't selected because we haven't contracted anything. Are you leaning towards having the bridge width the same width as the street to the north? On Second, that would be.
On Second, you mean the profile of the road?
The profile of the road.
Well, the bridge would have to be higher.
Higher, I'm sorry, I'm not being clear. So the width of the road,
Just talking 32 feet.
in terms, are you anticipating matching that? You brought it up as a discussion point. I wasn't sure where that was left.
It's, again, 35 north and 30 south, and we're talking about maybe making this 32.
Okay.
It's 24 now, we would widen it to 30 to 32.
And putting sidewalks through there, I think,
And then
you
walks
mentioned that,
on
right?
either side, and again, whether we put walks on will be a design consideration as we go through the process.
Okay. And what will be the decision-making process, short of the board's decision, about the disconnection from of Third? Will that be pretty much at the discretion of the property owner, or?
No, that's, again, there's road there now, it's a public road, and we have to weigh the benefits of that access versus any benefits we would get by disconnecting it. And certainly we have to do that.
So that would be
analysis.
some of an engineering
Yeah.
discussion also? Okay. And if we only put in one bridge, where are we at with thinking about a second egress out of that southern neighborhood if we only put Second Avenue Bridge in? I know that we've talked about going through.
Can you go back to that first
Right,
picture?
yeah. Okay,
Yeah, that's a good one. Or either way.
Again, right now, and some of the questions, what happens next week if this floods out? And, we have a kind of a contingency plan with the sheriff, that there's a driveway up here that's gated, that we would go up and cut the gate so we can have public access to get these people out and provide some access. That's kind of our contingency plan if something happens this summer. In the long term, we've talked about an underpass here, and that's been part of the negotiations with the town center to provide that underpass here as another way out. So, we're moving forward with that as well. This one, we've had some inquiries on Rogers, and they would need some access here, but certainly we don't have any concrete plans, but that's another alternative. So we're working on all those fronts to make sure we have a plan, immediate plan.
Right. That seems like that's the most important one, is the immediate plan, because down the road there would be a connection to McCaslin through Rogers' property, presumably. So, but
Right.
who knows when that might actually come to fruition. And then you said that there would be drop structures, or that's still in a engineering discussion phase?
There could be. We haven't gotten that far about, what the velocities are and so forth, but that could be something that we include in this plan.
And then you did bring up about trying to, whether or not it would make sense try to get all the western flow that's outside of the creek into the creek, and that
That's
was cost prohibitive, I think I heard
Right,
sometime.
down here, and that occurs down in this area here. Whether we get this far, I think What our intention is to do kind of a preliminary design for the whole creek corridor, and then figure out how much we can do with our budget, and then just do the final design on the elements that we can fund with the available dollars.
So which gets to my last point, which is, so we have, what do we have budgeted for this year? It's the design of this, is that where we are?
Well,
I
a
don't
couple of
remember.
things, we have over 14, 15, 16 dollars and 600,000 over those 3 years, and so does urban drainage. Urban drainage does have $100,000 right now in this project fund, which we could use to do the engineering work and get going on this, on the design. But in order to do the project, the full 1.2 million, we may have to front it, if we want to do next year, upfront the cost next year and get payback by urban drainage over 2 or 3 years.
I see. Okay. And you're not anticipating any complex environmental review from the Army Corps or anybody like that, are you? Or will you anticipate that?
No, but, it'll be a 6-month process to go through and identify what the impacts are and get their approval.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Other questions? Yeah, please.
I forgot about that 35-foot, 32-foot, or 30-foot thing. And so, why are those roads different sizes? Are they different quality of, like designations of roads, like arterial versus something or other? Is there ever a chance that they would be meeting in size? And if so, why would we make the bridge at a goofy size that doesn't match either?
Okay, we'll hear from the public on their comments on that.
It's...
It's 24 feet wide, it should be a little wider. I think the minimum...
I'm just saying, why wouldn't we make a bridge either 35 if the other road is ever likely to be 35, or 30 if it's likely that the other road's going to be decreased in size? Why would we pick a goofy size in between? It doesn't match either road.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we're ever going to have, it's not going to change its status. It's going to be a local road. We don't have to worry about the traffic carrying capacity of that road. It's a local road, and the width is really dictated by whether you want parking along there or not. And south of there, it's 30 feet, and that's really narrow if you want on-street parking. North of there, it's 35 feet, and they park along.
I'm just saying, so why would we hamper ourselves with a bridge that doesn't accommodate the larger road? So that's, okay.
To me, it's an expensive thing, so I'd like to get it as narrow as we can, and not build more width than we need.
Okay. Comments then from the community?
Number one,
All right.
Any thoughts about this, George?
good evening, council. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Standing here. Two things. Number one, I think we need immediate attention with the trees in the creek down to save the bridge that we do have. You look north, you look south, anyway up the creek. It's been that way for 20 years. Years ago, people paid to have that creek straightened out. They took a dozer in there and took them trees out, because it is private property at one time. And I think that what we need to do first, get the trees out of the bridge now, because it will take the bridge, the road out like it had previously. I'm not the only one that wants a new bridge across 3rd Street. I had Phyllis look up, and I didn't get the papers, that I turned a petition in to a previous town board, with this mayor being the mayor at the time, of over 100 votes, people, signatures, that wanted a new bridge across 3rd Street. If you look, a third of the town is on the south end, just about. They have no other exit, and I'm getting tired of hearing say, we're going out of trail. You want to walk out of trail? Because you'll never get an ambulance down that trail. You'll never get a car like Gladys up that trail. Let's give it some consideration. If we're going to spend money, let's do what the people want done here. Not a new bridge across 2nd Avenue, I'm telling you right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor and trustees, my name is Pat Kaprowski. I live in Longmont, but just a brief history of who I am and why I'm here. My great-grandfather bought the property that I now own in the early 20s. And it was left to me with the intention of preserving it, protecting it. I don't want to develop it. I could care less about development. I could care less.
Can you point just kind of in the map where you are? Oh, okay.
This is our property right this whole square. Our
Okay.
property actually extends to the south side of the creek. Basically just the bridge being here. This is all ours. So this would impact 80% of my property.
Okay, all right.
Where it's at right now, like I said, I don't want to develop that. It's basically leveled off to where I can use it for my own storage of my equipment, things like that. We do rent the house out, monthly to people from CU, people from NCAR, things like that, and we enjoy the house ourselves. So it's my intention just to keep it as is, preserve it the best I can, and quite honestly, we just want to be left alone. I don't want to deny the town a bridge. This box culvert design that is being proposed would leave me with basically 10 or 15 feet of access on the street versus right now, this is where I have access. I have all this for access right now. It would cut that down.
There's a house that, I'm trying to recollect where that is. A house on Second there?
The house is up here, and the house is actually not in floodplain.
Oh, okay.
But the property is, and again, I could care less about that.
What are those white buildings?
One is a shed. There's actually 2 sheds on the property that my grandfather moved in. And again, I use that area to the east for, I'm in construction, so I park my own equipment out there when it's not on a job site, things like that. If they were to grade that up, it would be on such a slope that that would be completely useless to me for any use whatsoever except to look at. It appears with this box culvert design that there's a lot of interest in the bike path. I've seen this happen in Longmont. It's called the St. Vrain Greenway. They did the same thing. They did all these creek improvements. The next mayor, the next council said, well, just as this gentleman stated, the public money has been invested in this, let's put a bike path through there. So I'm completely opposed to any public access to my property. I would think the town would like to look at, if it's a matter of water flow versus, the access, the bike trail, things like that, that we look at the girder design versus the box culvert design. That would provide better flow. I think that was addressed here tonight too. So. I do agree that there could be some clearing, the dead trees and things like that. I would like to see different bridge designs. I just find that unacceptable to where it would cut me off. Even just, we did the bridge and not the grading on the slopes. Just the approach to that bridge would limit me down on the east end of my property to where it'd be just worthless. So it would be creek bed is what it would be. I'm trying to be reasonable here. Like I say, I agree that the town needs a bridge, and I would not deny that. It's just since the bridge cannot go any further south because of the property and the way that is, I absorb the entire impact of the new bridge on my side of the property.
Okay.
So, I'm not interested in selling my property for this purpose. Again, I'm all for making some improvements. I'd like the grade that it's at right now to be basically left intact no matter what we do. And again, I just like it to be as pristine as I can possibly keep it. That's my intention.
Okay, thank you.
I have several comments, but what's new about that? Expect that, right? I will start out with 3rd Avenue. The town streets was plotted in this town. This map that I have is from 1911 when these streets were set out. And I'm going to tell you, I am blank, 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 sick and tired of resident corruption when it comes to our streets being closed. There's absolutely no sense to it. It has been done by former mayors, and Teddy and I suffer today from one of those corruptions with the park. Absolutely, do not close 3rd Avenue or Charles Street at all. That channel in there can be worked without closing the street. I would like to propose, though, that a pedestrian bridge be put in on 3rd Avenue. And by a pedestrian bridge, I'm talking about the type of bridges that is up on Singleton Trail that Boulder County puts in. They put one in up above or below Key Bank. And ProStack tells me that those are 2 cows wide. So therefore, that means my Volkswagen Bug could get down there. So you're actually going to be doing 2 things if you would consider a pedestrian bridge on 3rd Avenue. One, you're going to be creating a trail, which staff thinks that they have to have a trail. And this comes from the Coal Creek trail that is through Lafayette and all of that. And I understand where they came, how they have come up with that. But if you create a trail across 3rd Avenue, then you're going to have your trail. But 2, if you put in this pedestrian bridge, you're going to be able to create an emergency exit for the south end of town, which, you know, we have all hollered about that. Because those bridges can be, the abutments are there. All you have to do is buy the bridge and set them on top of these abutments and do the ingress to that. So you're actually getting 2 things for your value. But stop closing streets. Regarding 2nd Avenue, yes, I voiced my opinion very clearly at the resident meeting about the width of the street. Lisa, the reason that street is set narrow on the south side is that blankety-blank street project that was crammed down our throats a couple of years ago. That's the reason it's narrower on the south side. And that is utterly ridiculous. And I voiced my opinion and made it very plain that that bridge should not be 1 inch narrower on the south side than what it is on the north side. And I'm going to go over my 5 minutes because I'm not through. We don't want sidewalks and bike trails on the bridge. We don't want sidewalks south of Coal Creek Drive in Original Town. That has been made very, very clear over time. I did bring up the fact as to how the construction was going to be done while this bridge was built, how we were going to get to the south end of town, and I was told that half of the bridge would be closed down and worked on. The other half we would be able to cross. But I did not go into the time period because I don't think that they had any idea at that time, how long that might take. There are other residents south of the bridge that do not like the box culvert scenario. One, because I've spent enough time down there that I know that any debris comes down that it's going to definitely block those culverts. As far as the creek, it should be able, over the years, that has been able to be cleaned out without violating property rights of the owners. And this plan that they have come up with the National Flood and the mitigation and all that is just unbelievable. It's like Pat said, it takes up way, way, way too much of the property, and then it is definitely worthless to the property owner. The wildlife certainly is one thing, and once again, I mentioned the creek. This has always been an issue for Original Town, and I understand that it's very hard for you that have not lived here and have not seen a flood, how ugly that creek can get. And it gets absolutely, absolutely ugly. Something else that you have to take into consideration on this that no one has mentioned at all, there's going to be a dewatering project from Remington Homes. you better consider the amount of water that's coming down that creek from that dewatering project that's going to add to this creek.
Okay. Anything else from the public? So, comments or thoughts from the board? Let's see, let me tell you what I've heard, so that we want to see the cost and the design of both the box culvert as well as a bridge in terms of pricing and just what that would look like. I think, and the board can obviously correct me, but I think that we're interested in, just as he said at the beginning of the meeting, is that interested in replacing Second Avenue Bridge and considering Third Avenue in the future potentially. I think that was all I necessarily heard in stone. And board thoughts about any of that? Sandy?
I would, for my own edification, like to know historical peak flows. I mean, it's, ever since I've been here, I've just seen a little trickle in it, but obviously, as Gladys just said, it gets nasty when there's, I assume, the convergence of the rain and now with Remington, I think that's a very relevant point. We're going to have a lot of water in there that historically hasn't been in there, so it would be interesting to see what peak flows are in, what they've been historically and what they're anticipated to be.
Okay. Anything else from the board?
Yeah, since, I guess I'd be interested in seeing a follow-up of what's entailed with the possible pedestrian bridge that was suggested, just get an idea about that.
I'm sorry, what would you say?
I didn't hear that.
I'd like to see a follow-up to see about the feasibility of pedestrian bridge at Third Avenue.
My guess, and not speaking as an engineer, that during a flood period when you would want to use that as an EVA, that would be overtopped by that time, so it would not be functional. But if we're interested in just the pedestrian access, that would be another thing.
You mean just standard pedestrian access, not flood pedestrian access?
And so we also mentioned if you could come up with other ways to design a bridge, all the different, I mean, if there's
Sure.
like 3 or 4, key types of designs, it would be better than just seeing the 2 that you've already presented. And then whatever we can do to preserve as much property, owner's property, so that, we're not like their property here taking 80% of it. So again, I would like to know how much is needed to make it successful, and what varying degrees would do what. And then the last is the wildlife and the trees, how we can protect that. I know you're going to do an environmental study of some sort, so I'd love to see, what kind of wildlife is actually there.
Just to go back historically, and I've heard several people comment that years ago, periodically, people would get in the creek and there would be a public cleaning of the creek or whatever. And these days, we don't have that effort, but it's private property, so we don't have the right. And then at the minimum, if we can acquire the easements to at least get in there and do that, we may not do a lot of these channel improvements, but we will at least have the ability to go in and clear the debris. In fact, urban drainage would do that for us now, but they don't have the right to go into private property. So if we go through and negotiate, even if we don't do the channel improvements, to get the right to be able to go in and maintain the channel would be, something that we don't have now. And they would do that for us. We pay money into them, and that's what some of that money goes for. But they can't go into the creek right now because they don't have the right to.
And I'm sure that you can negotiate something that's reasonable, but I think 80% of someone's
Sure,
property is what I would not call reasonable.
That property owner has no intentions to develop. So if they want to leave that big floodplain on their property and don't want that potential development, maybe we can design something so, yeah, it does flood out there. We're not going to make the improvements that flood his protect his property. And if that can work with the rest of the plan, maybe we can minimize the impacts on his particular property.
And I guess I'm thinking, and it hasn't been stated, but, one way of dealing with this is that you put a big tube through there with concrete, and, you basically take out the creek. I'm assuming that we're wanting to keep this in as much natural
Absolutely, that's right.
as it is right now, as much. So I just, we haven't really said that, but I'm assuming that's why this is all based upon.
So I'm hearing that we can keep going on this project and proceed with getting an engineer and do more discussions with the property owners and about what the impacts and what we can do to create less impacts on their property while getting the channelization. So,
Yep. Great.
I mean, can I just reiterate, we are trying to preserve a riparian corridor, correct? I mean, on top of bringing the homes, or as many as we can, out of the floodplain, right? I mean, that's our goal, right?
the riparian, that's out of my league, so I need to
Okay.
have someone to help them. That wasn't my objective, but if that's what the board would
I mean,
like
that is what it is. I mean, it runs for many miles, like 19, 20 miles.
And I think you can see through past urban drainage projects, that's, something they strive for as well.
But just so it's sort of inferred to be in Deborah's criteria there, the impact of depth on width. How deep can we go, thereby narrowing the impact on width? Because if I were that property owner, it sounds like there's going to be one property owner with a tall wall there that's basically keeping his house out of the creek.
Right.
If I were that property owner, I would want that wall as far away from my house as possible, right? Preserving my property value. So how deep can we go in certain instances so that we don't have to go wide?
Sure.
And as I understand, with wildlife and, the full foliage, that how deep you go can kill it. I mean, I know there's varying degrees of that, so that, I'm assuming, will be part of the environmental
Right.
study.
That's why we'll have an environmental person that's going to look at that.
Okay.
Thanks very much for the presentation. It was really well done, very thoughtful, and look forward to more discussion, I guess, summertime or late spring.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks. So let's take a couple-minute break, and then we can start the regular meeting. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a Town of Superior Board of Trustees meeting for April 22nd, 2013. And Phyllis, if you call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Muffin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Joe Cirilli.
Here.
Trustees Igwe Gregori.
Here.
Chris Hansen.
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skumas.
Here.
Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Madley.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Pruitt.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Wright.
Thanks. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Trustee Williams.
I'd like to pull 7A, the minutes, with some corrections. And that'll do it.
Okay, any other changes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that change by Trustee Skumas, second by Trustee Cirilli. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. That brings us to reports, questions, and issues. Anybody want to start this evening?
I'd like to just start.
Yes, please.
Just talking about Arbor Day and Founders Park. And I have to tell you, when I first came on the board, I think it's been over 6.5 years now, there was one thing that I had vowed to see to its completion before I retired from local politics. And this is probably I couldn't be happier, I guess, on Saturday. Just seeing how beautiful it is, the tremendous work that staff has done and pro-staff has done, and I was just, after we went through all the festivities and the official stuff, I walked off to the side and I just listened to all these children playing and running around, and I thought, this is what it's all about. I mean, really, public service is for things like that, and I feel like say thank you to the board and to previous boards for their support and to see this to its fruition. It's great for a regional town, but I think it's great for the town of Superior. And I think future generations, long after we're all gone from here, or even long gone from this planet, there'll be future generations that will enjoy this amazing park. So I just want to say congratulations. I'm just very proud of what we've all accomplished together. So,
Great, thank you. Trustee Pennington?
Ditto on Founders Park. It gave me a great kick to drive up to it and see the official Founders Park signs. And for any community members who are listening, this, I think, is just such a successful collaboration, as Elia said. I mean, from the residents who brought it to our attention and kept dogging it, to smart leadership by ProStack, to some good decision-making at the board level, to the kids now playing in it. I mean, this is really successful collaboration, so a ditto on those comments. Prior to tonight's meeting, we had 5 local realtors meeting with any member of the board and staff who wanted to be there, and I thought it was just, again, reinforcement of the visioning that's been done on the town center. Certainly confirmed, I think, the process we went through before and validated some of our findings and added some new information to that as well. Had an OSAC meeting last week. We are down to 4 active members on OSAC right now because we had Emily move out of town, and Nathan's had a baby. Family had a baby, and he's not able to commit the time anymore. So wanted to reiterate it's important to bring these committees up to full staff. So
Yeah, we would have, well, we have one applicant, and she was not able to make tonight's meeting for interviews. We've got that scheduled for May 13th.
And thanks, but, if we can do what we can to get the word out repeatedly, I think
we
there's...
have the open house in
Yeah.
April.
I do think there's community interest. I don't know how we get to those people, but got to keep trying. I attended ProStack's community engagement process for the, proposed community/rec center. And I actually thought it was a good first step. It was well attended by all ProStack committee members and several trustees and a couple of community members, but we did a dry run through that, and I'm hopeful that the next 2 will turn out the community participation. But I think it's a necessary step, and I think we have a great facilitator in Chris Drapinski with Green Play. So I'm hopeful that that'll be successful. And I wanted to raise an issue, and I have gotten several calls on this, and I'm not sure about the convergence between police enforcement and the town board. So I'd like to have this clarified. There's been a long-term speed trap at Colton and Rock Creek Circle. And it just was brought to my attention again today because I happened to be turning left when red sirens went on, grabbing another person along Colton. I'm sure
It wasn't you?
It wasn't me, thank heavens. I was going the other direction, or it could have been. Anyway, the bottom line is, obviously, we've got a problem at that corner. And I'm wondering if it isn't time to do a community service by providing one of those signs with the flashing speed you're going versus what the speed limit is, and try to educate people. I do know Alex brought up in Traffic and Safety Committee the possibility of actually increasing the speed limit there because people travel at an increased speed over, I think it's 35 now, and you had proposed 40. Was that correct? So I think we've got to take those things into consideration because there's a difference in my mind between catching the occasional speeder and having a perpetual problem there, and that perpetual problem sort of tells me other actions needed.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Williams?
Well, I attended all the same meetings here and do have huge kudos for the Arbor Day and Founders Park celebration. My 16-year-old daughter says it's the coolest park ever, so I thought that would be very fitting to hear from a kid. I know she's only 16, but she kept thinking, oh, I should be 5 right now. I would have a really great time. So I also attended a library luncheon appreciation last week. It's the library trustees put on a luncheon for all the staff for the Louisville Library. So that was nice, and Sandy made the meal, and I brought it over. So that was nice. Didn't have to do that. I also, I did not attend a Dr. Cog meeting. There was a snowstorm. However, I watched it on TV, so I'm going to report based on what I watched. And there was not quorum at that meeting either. So there was a lot of things they had to table for the next meeting, and so they just basically had a few things that they were able to vote on, but a couple of things do kind of, they don't affect us, but they're interesting to note. There is a something called a travel demand management pool program that is how do I explain this? But it takes federal funds and it invests in kind of some of the area of the first and final mile. And some of the projects that they were proposing not to be able to fund on this is what they call small infrastructure projects, because they say once they're federalized, the time and effort to administer them and implement them is disproportionate to their actual costs. So they're saying anything under $300,000 to $50,000, that range, is the projects that they're willing to do, but anything lower than that, they would basically, they don't want to be a part of that and have them be in the pool. So that actually, how that affects us is US 36 wanted to put one of their projects in for one of these pools, and that would be the bike shelters. And I think that's at Table Mesa, I believe. So they'll have to find another way to fund that infrastructure. So that was one thing that didn't get tabled, that was voted on, and that was voted down. And so now, basically, any kind of small infrastructure is not going to be included in that. And that could affect us later. You never know. Also, there was talk about the ramp projects, which is how CDOT is now using or utilizing their funds to basically put them, instead of waiting till they have all the funds and then doling that out to the projects, they're doling what they have to each project each year, so that I think over a 5-year process, so that they can get more projects out there, more dollars out there, although it's the same number of dollars over the 5 years. It's just having it continually, people be working and jobs available and projects being implemented. So basically, Dr. was talking about, well, how do we prioritize them, and what is CDOT going to do? What projects are they going to pick? Is it going to be with the projects that we already agreed on in the regional transportation plan with Dr. And so basically, CDOT has control over that, and they will pick as many projects as they can that are already in the regional transportation plan that's in our whole region that Dr. approved. But they will probably pick projects that are not, and so we will probably have to go back and amend the regional transportation plan, and it could affect projects such as the Jefferson Parkway project, where that is in the regional transportation plan. However, it is a P3, is what they call it. P3 is a private-public partnership. Thank you. And those rely on private funds, but ramp money would be federal money. That's from CDOT. So that means that the Jefferson Parkway could still apply for it, but Dr. would have to come back and say, okay, how can we, fiscally constrain this and have it still be a part of the regional transportation plan? And so that there may be another vote involved in that, or not. It depends on if they come forward. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. So in terms of the ramp funds, if I can't imagine that Jefferson Parkway would be approved for that, because the reason it's fiscally constrained is because it required no federal or public dollars. So now you say that it wasn't fiscally constrained because they needed the money. So I think it would be a pretty conversation.
Right, and if CDOT wants to give them ramp funding, I'm not sure Dr. can say no.
But it does change the status of the project.
It does,
in many
and
important ways.
I'm sure that there would be ways, I don't really know how that would be off my top of my head here, but I'm sure that, according to Dr. that any of these projects that are in the RTP, whether they have funds that are a P3 or some other federal fund, they will still be supported, and that's what they're expecting from Dr.
Well,
So
maybe it won't ever get to that point. If it did,
Exactly.
If it did get to that point, then we would have to have some significant conversation about that. And I assume that they couldn't have any federal funds, because then you'd have to go through the environmental impact statement process. So I'd be curious to see how they
logically, I
anticipate
can't
that.
imagine them doing it, but
Yeah.
you never know.
I don't think I have much to say except to thank the Mayor Pro Tem for filling in my stead at the last meeting. I haven't missed very many meetings over the course of my time.
I was promised you wouldn't miss anything.
I tried my best, but there's this darn board review thing you have to do every decade. So once a decade, I will not be here. So, but thank you. Trustee Skumatz?
Just a couple quick things. One, I stood in for Trustee Sorelli at the Historic Committee meeting and the Historical Committee meeting. It was great. They debriefed on their recent well-attended Jane Doe murderer type event and planned for their next event and their upcoming walk. So that was great. I attended the Arbor Day celebrations. I wanted to thank Lowe's for donating one of the door prizes that we had for the drawings, and also Ecological Lawn and Tree and Boulder County Energy Smart and Solar Gardens folks for coming and speaking at the event to try to educate our residents, and thanks to the folks local businesses who were at the booths. That was think it helped make a little bit more stuff to do than just plant a tree. So I hope that we continue to expand in that direction, but that next time we should not have the person announce before our speakers that people should go play on the playground. It kind of led away some of the audience. But anyway, the next, let's see, and let's see. The next thing I wanted to mention was that we have several upcoming events for the environmental type stuff. One is on Sunday the 5th is a collection event at the North Pool from 9 to 12. Note that was Sunday, May 5th. We couldn't get a Saturday, and we apologize for that, but that was the best we could do. And it will be for hazardous and hard to recycle and e-waste, electronic waste. The Saturday after that, is that right? Yes, okay, is the 11th. Yeah, that's 6 days, okay. Saturday the 11th is the next event, which is the Shred Day. And that'll again be at the North Pool from 9 to 12 as well. And that leads in, and so I'm going to have my next coffee buzz on that morning before that Shred Day event. And the following coffee buzz I'm going to have in conjunction with the Historic Committee. I'm going to have it at the Historic Building with the open house that the Historic Committee has. So that'll be June 1st, I believe.
That's a neat idea.
Hey, Lisa, on the hard to recycle and e-waste, are there costs associated with that?
Yes, somewhere between $2 to $10.
For the, is it like household chemicals and stuff? Is this the one for that?
There's not any, the electronics, there's a fee.
There's a fee.
For the other kind of stuff, there's not.
Okay, you're dumping a TV, that's going to cost you.
Or
A computer.
CPU or something like that.
We should also thank Panera for all the great food they brought, since Lisa thanked everybody else. Yeah, thank you for that.
Great. Trustee Strelly.
I was out of town last week, unfortunately, because I did not want to miss, in particular, the Historical Commission events and the Founders Park and Arbor Day celebration. With respect to the park, I've been a supporter of it and aware of how well it's turned out all along, so my kudos to everybody involved, ProStack in particular, and the engagement of the town residents. I think we've come up with something good, and it's good for original town, but there's a great offshoot of, I think there's a great benefit to the marketplace of that park being as nice as it is. So thank you, Lisa, for sitting in at the Historical Commission.
It's my pleasure.
I have nothing else to.
Great. Trustee Hanson.
Yeah, I attended the Arbor Day celebration as well, and want to reiterate what Sandy had said, that it really was a great effort on everybody's behalf, and I think a good example of what we can do as a town and residents together. So thanks again to ProStack. I do want to say, though, that whether you're 16, 5, 40, or older, there's all kinds of things in that park, from walking trails to playground equipment to a teen area. So there really is something for everybody. And I drove by there yesterday, and I saw the ultimate Frisbee people out there, and I go, oh no. But then there was also people on the baseball diamond, there was a little youth soccer game going on, there was people on the playgrounds, and then the barbecue area was full too. So it really was being utilized by everybody, so real good to see. Let's see, attended a ProStack meeting, and that was the evening of our first community meeting to start getting input from the community on our indoor community and recreation space needs. But unfortunately, we had poor weather, so I think the turnout was a little bit less than what we'd like to see. But I encourage everybody to be at the May 1st meeting, 6:30 to 8 is going to be at Superior Elementary School. That's May 1st. And then May 8th, the venue has changed from El Dorado. It's now going to be at the Horizons Community Center at 6:30 to 8 p.m. So I encourage everybody to go out and give your input on what you think our needs might be. And then, Sandy, good points on the speeds on Colton. I like the idea of having one of those flashing signs that says this is your speed. When the study is done, I would caution you to don't jump to raise the speed limit too quickly, because there's a lot of kids that come south of Colton to go participate in sports down on the fields down there. So there's a lot of kids that walk and ride their bikes. So take that into consideration when you do your studies. And then lastly, snow removal. I think the snow removal has been very good this year. Over in Louisville, there's quite a bit of snow on the streets, and then when we come over into Superior, the snow is cleared off, so nice job on the snow removal this year, and that's it.
Great. Do you think, with especially the meeting that's being held at Superior Elementary, that maybe the school news flyer or paper or whatever it is that they call it, maybe could incorporate it? Might be one way of getting some better
Yes,
attendance.
I think so. We had that discussion at ProStack meeting that we're going to try and get the word out several different channels, and that was one of them that was brought up.
Okay, great.
So let's talk to Ms. Aikenoy about that.
Great. Trustee Skumatz?
And Matt or whoever, will there be online ways to comment on that as well?
On the,
Recreation.
Engage.
yeah, we have the Engage Superior website, yeah.
Okay. Town clerk, anything? Town manager?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple items. We also had a resignation on RCAC, Lisa Nyberger. So we've got a vacancy there. So we'll continue to actively seek out applicants for all of our committees.
But we got one attendee at our last open house for committees, right?
Right.
So that may not be the only or most effective way to do it.
Yeah. Through newspaper, e-blast, all sorts of things. We have a half marathon scheduled for Sunday, June 9th from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. Skirts Sports Half Marathon 5-miler, 5K race throughout the community. I put the route in the digest and continue to update you as we get closer to that. Alex provided some information on the Phase 2 team that was awarded that construction. Let me know, or Alex know if you have any questions there. The underpass up here at McCaslin interchange for that was part of Phase 2 was a alternate bid item. Came in under what we had budgeted. We had budgeted $1 million. The price that came in at was $850,000. So we're going to start working with CDOT on an IGA for that. So that'll come forward to you.
Matt, a question. Where did the Davidson Mesa thing stand?
That is a good question. I don't know. That was included in the base, I believe. So, but I'll follow up on that. That's a good question. I don't know what that came in at. Let's see. What else? I think that was it.
Okay. Town
Just out of curiosity for the listening public, what happens when something comes under budget by $150,000? What happens to that money?
That's reallocated within the capital improvement budget or goes into the reserve or
Okay.
fund balance.
It's always nice to see that.
Anything from the town attorney?
Nothing, thank you.
All right. That brings us to number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items.
Gladys Forshey, 404 South Third Avenue. I want to thank the Transportation Service Committee for meeting with us residents last Saturday regarding the bridge on 2nd Avenue and the 3rd Avenue scenario. Residents were very grateful that he took the time to come. I would like to request another meeting with that same committee regarding street resident abuses. So if you could contact me if that is that possibility and when we might do it, I would be grateful for that.
Can I interrupt for one quick second? And I won't take away from your minutes. When is our next Transportation and Safety Committee meeting? Can we schedule one so that Gladys can come and we can maybe have more of the public?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think we have a future date planned for it, but
Maybe we could.
We can start working on that.
Okay.
And I need to be educated. I have one of the new light bulbs that's burnt out. That is hazardous waste now, is that correct?
No.
So I can just throw it in the trash?
You can, according to what's on the EPA website. They ask you to double bag it, but that's what's allowed.
Okay. Well, I was very surprised that it burned out on the first
I am too. Sorry.
Well, that's all right.
I'll take yours.
There are lemons.
Again, I want to thank staff for having this meeting for the residents regarding Second Avenue Bridge. It is a very huge issue in our lives that live south of the creek on multiple issues. I have one other question on 7D. There's a map in here, and that's regarding the property that CDOT bought. And I just wanted to know if this one little square area here by the invert, is that the cemetery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I thought so, but I just wanted to double check. And so the cemetery really isn't affected by that then, is that right? Because I didn't come to those meetings when you had those.
Right, the cemetery won't be affected.
Okay. Okay, one other thing I have, last week I went to a meeting that Boulder County had, and I am mentioning this because of the fact that Superior is involved with this hazardous contamination scenario on Rocky Flats. Boulder County is creating the Regional Mountain Trails Master Plan. They are going to be creating trails west of 36 in the foothills and in the mountains. And the little map that they have here, Superior, of course, is west of 36. I'm mentioning this because of the fact that the people that are involved in this master plan are Arapahoe and Roosevelt National Forest, the National Park Service, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, City of Boulder, City of Longmont, Boulder County. They have also contacted Gilpin County, Larimer County, and Jefferson County was at this meeting. The reason that they are combining all of these together, working together, they're going to be having a series of meetings between now and May 20th throughout Boulder County for resident input as to what residents would like to see on these trails. But the reason I'm mentioning this is that they are going to be working very hard to include the Rocky Mountain Greenway, which is the one that comes from the Rocky Mountain Arsenal through Rocky Flats going on up to Rocky Mountain National Park. Perhaps Superior wants to voice their opinion about that, whether it would come through the town of Superior or not because of the contamination. There is a meeting on April 29th for Southeast Boulder County at Louisville Public Library from 6 to 7:30. And I strongly urge you to go as representatives of our town government as to what your opinion is regarding bringing contamination into the town of Superior from that trail. It's a very well-run meeting. It would be simply that they would go from one resident to another, and you can state your issues very simply, like, you don't want the contamination. My thing was I wanted historic projects considered within this, and I'm going to go back to this next one because I want the recycled materials used if they do any building on these trails. So, but they're collecting all this information, and then they're going to be putting this together. So, once again, I think it's something that you definitely need to get your 2 cents worth in on.
Great,
I can
thank you.
make that meeting.
Thank you. I thought possibly you might.
Additional,
Andrew,
oh, I'm sorry.
can
Sandy.
I ask?
Yeah, of course.
Gladys makes a good point about that, but I'm not sure this board has ever tried to establish a consensus on that particular issue. So
And
before...
the Greenway is also not going to be coming through the town, if I understand the representations of how that is going to flow. Generally, it started at the Arsenal, it goes to Three Ponds, I think they call it, which is in Westminster, and from Westminster into the Rocky Flats. So it's going to be south of us.
So it's going to connect.
Yeah, it will connect, but just in terms of that Greenway project, when I looked at that map specifically, it doesn't look like that part is going to come in through the town.
Where would it connect then?
Yes, I think it'd be very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I highly encourage the meeting. But
Where do you anticipate it connecting?
through Westminster, through their open space, roughly.
And not attached to our open space at all?
No, because I think it's going to run south. It's not. I don't anticipate these.
Sounds
I mean,
good to me.
It could be that they'll change, but it wasn't coming up. Another logical way would be through like Cold Creek in that area, but it didn't seem like it was going to do that. So be important to stay abreast of it, but that was my understanding.
That's what I was thinking.
Additional public comment?
Hello, Heather Craycraft with the Superior Chamber of Commerce. And we, in the community, if you have not heard, had lost a dear friend of the chamber, a past employee, when there's only been 6, happen to be all women that have worked for the chamber. Miss Sandy Middleman passed away, and I just wanted to express my absolute gratitude and honest, genuine surprise at the support of the community. We have received gift cards for her family from Panera, from Whole Foods, from Land Rover, and they continue to come in. So I just wanted to say thank you to the community during the meeting, and the Horizons has even come through and given them some time in their building for a reception. So thank you, and if anyone has any questions, they can contact the chamber further.
Great, thank you very much.
Good evening, Jim Payne, Superior Resident and ProStat Chair. If I may just amplify something that came out in response to Trustee Skumat's question about the online participation. EngageSuperior.com is a website we've set up for that, and I think it's something that will have application for other topics. But for now, with all of the extensive outreach we do with multiple meetings and surveys and so forth, it's so hard to publicize each one of those. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to stress open face-to-face meetings. But EngageSuperior.com is an online go-to place where you can always go and find out what's going on, comment, post pictures. ProStack members can communicate back and forth with residents. So we encourage you to really emphasize that. In fact, I'd like to give you all a supply of the little cards that we have, so you can hand them out to residents and say, hey, just go online, follow this, you'll find it very worthwhile. So I'll make sure you get those cards.
Great. Thank you very much. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, that brings to presentations, which we don't have any this evening, which then brings us to the consent agenda. And remaining on the consent agenda is the acceptance of the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting, final approval of an ordinance amending 16-19-170 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding temporary signs in the public right-of-way, and adoption of a resolution approving a memorandum of agreement with CDOT for the exchange of portions of 3 town-owned parcels required for Phase 2 of the US 36 Managed Lanes project. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Sorelli. Comments? My only comments in general, I'm not in favor of extending the time that signs will be allowed. I know that the Planning Commission supported it for that reason. I'm certainly willing to see what happens. I think that we should be cognizant of sign clutter, and if it becomes a problem, that we might have to readdress that in the future. But for that reason, that's why I'm supporting it this evening. So, any additional comments? So I think that we're sort of spending money here. So.
Shirley?
Yes.
Gregorius?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Buckle?
Yes.
Bennington?
Yes.
Skumat?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That brings us, what was 7A, the minutes of April 8th, 2013 Board of Trustees meeting. And Trustee Williams.
I just wanted to make sure this was on the record under public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items in the minutes. There was a name unknown for a Superior resident that discussed the town hall with Senator Nicholson, and also brought forward an idea on air quality measurement systems. And his name is Che Horder. Che, C-H-E, Horder.
Horder.
But he said it on the...
You said it, but I couldn't.
You couldn't hear it? Okay, I just want to...
The shade didn't make any sense to me. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody
Trustee
else?
Bennington?
Same issue as the minutes. On page 8 of the minutes, which is page 35 of the thing on the iPad, I might have been sleeping, but I didn't see this action take place. In the middle, it says that we defeated the resolution by involving Clean Energy Collective regarding taking payment for promotion, which is what I recall. But below it, there's a paragraph that says, after a discussion by the board, it was decided to table the approval of the resolution for an agreement with Clean Energy Collection regarding distribution of information for a community solar garden, and I think that needs to be deleted. I don't remember tabling anything. Was I?
I think we discussed whether we could revise the wording,
We did.
and the decision was just to table the whole idea.
That was the direction we gave the town staff.
Well, we prior had defeated the
We
resolution.
defeated the resolution, but then we tabled a rewording of it.
Right.
We didn't go forward with
Oh,
it.
maybe if it said table, a rewording of the resolution.
I think
because-
that's my recollection
Yeah,
of how.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and then if I can, and again, maybe I'm incorrect on this, on page 9 of the minutes, let me just read my notes here.
While you're reading, Bill, what would your preference be, to approve them tonight with those changes, or do you want to have them come back around at the next meeting? What?
If
Sure.
you would rather see them again, to make sure I've got the wording right, I would like to have them come back. If you're okay with me making the change by myself, then I would have you approve.
I trust you. I'm okay making the changes yourself. Put it in the back. I mean, they're minor changes.
You know, I'm going to have to go on. I'll take this one up. It had to do with Planning Commission action on sign spinners that I felt was misrepresented, but move on, please.
Okay. So, let's see, did we have a
We can make a motion
motion to approve that with
the
those
minutes.
changes?
Yes, I can make a motion.
Trustee Gregos, second.
Give it a second.
I'm sorry. Trustee Cirilli. In discussion, I'm just going to abstain since I wasn't here for the discussion. So, all in favor? Unanimous?
Are you in favor or no?
Okay.
You're not-
Thank you. And then,
No.
if it's important, just
No, that,
we can certainly
go
end up.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. With that, let's go to item number 8, approval liquor license renewal for Rock Creek Sports Grill. And Mr. Magley?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess a question for the board on how you'd like to proceed with this item. Phyllis has contacted the owners or manager of the Rock Creek Sports Grill about tonight's meeting, and I don't think anyone is here.
I don't see anyone.
For this item, so the question on how you'd like to proceed, there's,
And did you talk to them in person, or did you just send an email?
Phyllis?
I talked to the manager in
Thanks.
person, and he said he would get a hold of the owner and make sure the owner was here tonight to answer questions. And I don't see him at all.
And just for procedural purposes, so you know, the way that renewal works on the liquor license is, if you're not going to approve tonight, then we have to set it over for a public hearing at which the applicant would be able to testify, and there would be other witnesses if they wanted to.
So we couldn't postpone this until the next regularly scheduled meeting. We would actually have to set a public hearing, go through the whole kit and caboodle.
Generally, the way this works is what some of my boards and commissions do is somebody makes a motion to approve it, the renewal. Once that fails, then there's a motion to set it for a public hearing. That's usually how it works. Just because procedurally it's a little difficult to do this. So.
And can he approve without the owner being here?
Yes.
Is that allowed? So we
No
could
need
do
for the owner
that.
to be here. You may approve it. Generally, as you know, a renewal doesn't necessarily come before you unless there is a violation in the last year. I mean, some cities, it's an administrative approval. But because there was a violation, that's why it comes to your attention. So.
Well, I'm just going to say, and I know board members have thoughts, I'm disappointed that they're not here because I had questions for them. So I'm not sure exactly how to proceed with my
And the other option
concern.
is to table and see if we can get, to table to the next meeting and see if we can get them here to answer questions.
Okay, Trustee Pennington?
Ditto. This is very serious to me. I've seen some irregularities myself when I've eaten there, and I'm quite concerned. The impact on a teenager who is inappropriately served alcohol can be immense in their lives. They, of course, think it's cool that particular moment until they're stopped by the police off premises, and any alcohol is a DUI and has severe consequences to our youth. And so I think we deserve the courtesy of a personal appearance.
Trustee Cirilli?
I'm not seeing any harm in scheduling a public hearing. So I'd like to move, to get to that point, I'd like to move that we approve the approval of the renewal.
Defeat the approval.
And have a vote on that and see.
See how it proceeds.
Yeah.
So if it's approved, it's approved, and if it's not approved, then...
Then we have
Yeah.
to schedule a public. That's my motion, that we approve the renewal.
That we
So-
approve the renewal?
Yes, that's the
Yes.
motion, and then we get to vote on
And
it.
it might be
right?
turned down.
It might lose.
That's right.
If it loses, then you have another motion to set this for a public.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Okay, it's a little bit awkward, it's the way that the liquor code is set up.
So before we do that, I just want to make sure there's no public comment regarding this. Okay, don't see any, so there is a motion to approve the renewal of the liquor license for Rock Creek, I'm sorry, what is it called?
Sports Grill.
Sports Grill. And a second by Trustee Skumatz. Any further discussion regarding this issue? All in favor? Trustee Henson, opposed? Nobody else? So that motion fails. And any other
Well, we can
motions?
make a new motion to,
Yes.
or no, can we do that?
Yeah, I just wanted, as far as calendar goes, on May 13th, which is the next meeting, we have a couple of the town center items, and then the 28th, I'm trying to think what we have on the 28th. There might be a little bit more room on the 28th, so it doesn't have, does that be the next?
And don't we need a month in advance for a public hearing anyway? We
I'm
don't-
sorry?
We don't need a month in advance for a public hearing anyway?
No.
Oh.
But when does their license expire?
As long as this is pending, it does not expire.
Okay.
So as long as the renewal is pending, they still have a license. So we don't have to worry.
Right, so they have the opportunity to come back at a public hearing, right?
Yes.
And in the meantime, their liquor licenses...
They may
and-
continue to serve
Yeah.
because their application, I mean, their license remains
So
valid.
either day works then.
So the motion would be to bring this up again, but we don't have a date, or do we have?
Well, it's either May 13th or the 28th.
The 28th.
And the state hasn't imposed their restriction yet.
The state, they're
Yes, they did.
finished with the state enforcement.
So they were already had the 15 days where they weren't allowed to
Well, they
serve.
have dates set for
They
the,
have
Okay.
dates
It's in
set.
May.
No, I saw that. I mean, that will continue, and we're not
Yes,
impeding on that process.
Yes, that process happens regardless of what happens.
Okay.
So trustee Gregorius, you want to pick one of those?
So, May 20th it is?
Okay.
Make a
Motion to set a public hearing for May 28th for the liquor license renewal.
Renewal for Rock Creek Sports Grill. Yep.
Okay, motion by trustee Gregorius, second by trustee Skumatz. Discussion, public comment, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And then I had a question about process here. And if it's too complex, we can take this offline, but I thought that the process was that if they had a violation, that the violation would come in front of the municipal judge in the town, and I saw that really kind of worked through the state liquor licensing authority. So can you tell me
Sure.
how that works?
There's two ways that this can happen. One is a local enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So the sheriff's department goes out and does sting locally. Then it would come before our municipal judge.
I see.
The state has the option of doing enforcement against any liquor licensee anywhere in the state, anytime, and they
Okay.
deal with it
Okay.
they deal with it on their own.
Okay.
They can happen, simultaneously. They can happen. It's really up to the state when they do this.
Great, okay, thank
And
you
there's
very
a whole
much.
new crew of people at State Liquor, so this is a whole new way that they're working.
Uh-huh. Okay, all right, thank you, that makes it clear. Appreciate that. Trustee Williams?
Have we had any any liquor license violated in our town
Yep.
at this point?
Yes.
In the past, you mean?
In the past?
Oh, yeah.
Bleachers.
Bleachers, which is predecessor to,
The same
That
place?
was the name, yeah.
That caused the change, so the judge.
Change so the judge.
Right.
Okay. And was it renewed?
Yeah, there was a
There was a fine and
suspension.
suspension.
And there are also several other the state has been enforcing here, and they've had several other stipulations with other licensees in town.
And is it a 3 strikes and you're out kind of law, or is there?
No, but it does get progressively worse.
Okay.
In addition to, it comes back to you for renewal, and you have the option to not renew, there's also, the state can continue to enforce, and the penalties get worse and worse. They have to serve more time, and eventually it will be revocation of the license.
So if a town board, let's say, does not renew, what happens to that business?
They have no liquor license.
They get to serve food.
They can serve food only.
Bring your
it's
own
a good
food,
for
yeah.
a sports grill.
So it impacts them
Generally, that
greatly
closes the
then?
business.
It closes, that's what I was going to say, okay, that's, okay.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Okay, all right, well, good.
All right. Thank you, and Matt or somebody can fill them in on our general consternation if they
What if they don't show up? on
decided not to
28th?
show up. Well, then,
Then you have the option to non-renew their license because they're not there. If you have questions for them, and
I would caution, though, to jump to judgment, because there's
I'm
poor
curious.
weather out, and
Yeah.
I mean, there might be reasons why they couldn't be here.
But I'm saying on the 20th, they don't show up twice, to me, that's, this, if I was running my business, I would show up if I had to ski down here on McCaslin. So that's just, unless I don't live there, but,
Did you guys get the emails
no?
during this meeting or anything?
No?
oh,
No.
No, we can't.
Saying that they wouldn't be able to come.
Oh,
no, but trustee Hanson, I think your point's very well taken. Don't want to rush to judgment about
We will
anything in
not rush to
particular.
judgment on a public hearing.
right, one.
We will only consider the evidence.
So looking like a lawyer, thank you. With that, let's move to item number 9, adoption of a resolution approving a construction contract with Aggregate Industries Western Region, Inc. for the 2013 Street Rehabilitation Program. Mr. Magley?
Thank you, Mayor. Alex Arnell, Public Works and Utilities Director, has a brief overview of this contract tonight.
Thank you, Alex Arnello, Public Works Director, and we're at the time again where we're getting ready for our street project this summer. And the streets planned this year are in Circle Park, the completion of El Dorado Drive through Circle Park, and also in the Arbors and Hillside neighborhoods. We're again proposing this year to use the full-depth reclamation process, the FDR process that we used in 2012. I've given you a list of projects and a map in your packet. In addition to those streets, we will be resurfacing the Purple Park parking lot, because we're right there, so we can just use that equipment to resurface that lot. We'll also be installing a second raised pedestrian crossing on El Dorado Drive. There's already one there now, and so where the trail crosses the road, we'll be installing another pedestrian crossing. So we advertised the project on the town's website and through Rocky Mountain e-purchasing system. 5 bids, we had good competition, 5 bids were received, and the low bid was Aggregate Industries for an amount of $2,264,000 for schedules A through C. So they were a low bidder by $92,000. Asphalt Specialties that did the project last year was second low bidder. We'll be constructing this, it may take through the end of September because this is a little larger project than we had last year. We will be hiring an intern to help us with communications with the residents. And then, as we discussed last year, to minimize disruption and inconvenience for residents, we've included incentives for completing the work ahead schedule and penalties for non-performance. And what we've determined is that we think that you can comfortably, from the day you start constructing the roadway, tearing it up, to the day of the base lift, we think you can get it done in 10 days, 10 working days. And so that would be kind of our 0 point. If they can get it done in 7 days, they would get a bonus of $3,000 per segment. If it's 8 days, it's 2,000. If it's 9 days, it's 1,000. And then if they go beyond that, they would start getting penalties of $1,000 per day for each day that they're over that amount. That won't include any weather days or any days, if there's under drain, special construction, we would give them some additional time, but we don't want the road torn up for a month. We want this thing completed expeditiously. So there is potential with 17 segments of a potential of $54,000 in bonuses if they got this thing done pretty quick. So we included that in the project. Let's see what else. From a budgeting standpoint, it was a little bit above the budget we had. I've given you a breakdown. We're including about a 5% contingency on top of their bid, plus we have our town-wide maintenance and our surveying, engineering, materials testing. So for the total street needs for that particular budget item, it looks like we need about $2,750,000, and we have $2.5 million budgeted. We've identified several projects we could postpone or not need as much money as we anticipated, so we could have savings about $150,000 from other projects. And we're thinking we do have potential of $100,000 coming from contingency, because if you look at last year's capital budget, how much revenues exceeded expenditures, there was some extra money there. So we're asking that you approve this contract and you give us the flexibility of going up to $2,750,000.
Trustees, comments?
So I had 3 questions about this topic, and one was, I noticed that you're recommending the lowest bid firm, and we were satisfied with the second low bid person last year, right?
I don't know if we were satisfied. We had some issues with the second low bid, the Asphalt Specialties. We were satisfied with the product, probably not as much as their
With the timing?
Getting it done. So.
And I assume you called quite a few references for
Yes.
the bid?
We checked out the low bidder to make sure that they had done acceptable work in other municipalities. Greenwood Village and Lakewood, they had experience, and we got good references from them on those other projects, yes.
Okay, both quality and timing?
Yes.
I really like your idea about the reward and the penalty, but I would have doubled the penalties for going over. I would, because you want to light a fire, and so I think, yes, it's nice if it finishes early. It's very bad if it finishes late, and so I would have probably made a different scale, not equal, but.
Appreciate that feedback, because we're just trying to figure out what is a good incentive.
It needs to escalate so that they really do get the impact. And finally, my routine question about warranties.
It's a 2-year warranty, so we would, they have to warrant the project for 2 years. So we have an inspection towards the end of that period, and if there are deficiencies, anything that's failing during that period, they're required to come back and repair those deficiencies. And we have a performance bond to hold them accountable for doing that. So it's a 2-year warranty.
How far, I always think back to the Indiana project, where we diagnosed why we had a problem. We went down to whatever level we needed to make sure that problem didn't recur, and then, moved ahead. And how far down does this thing go, and is there any place where we've had a recurring problem and we need to worry about base stuff as well, and kind of going this way and that way and God knows what?
Right.
Because I hate just resurfacing a problem.
I can tell you that, the technique we used last year, we're not seeing any cracking like we had seen in prior years with the prior year's projects. So we're comfortable with the process we used last year. Again, we have expansive soils, we have a difficult environment to deal with, and when you have failures down the road, is it the soils or is it the contract, a poor performance by the contractor? And on Indiana,
and none of the streets that we're talking about in this batch are ones that have humpy problems or whatever?
yes, they do. I mean,
And so are we resurfacing those, or are we actually doing something with the grading?
no, we're doing the process we did last year, where we're not just overlaying, we're, taking the existing asphalt, rubbleizing it, compacting it into the soil, and then coming back with a whole new virgin layer of asphalt.
It's addressing the bed problem, though, that's what I'm asking. It addresses the bed problem?
Yeah, but yes, I mean, we are pleased with what we did last year, and that it
Which is only 1 year. So,
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3-4 years down the road, so that it really shows up, so that's why I asked.
Okay, yes.
Trustee Hansen?
Just comments. I think the incentive and the penalties are good, but if the project gets delayed for whatever reason, the penalties really don't mean much to the residents that are impacted by that. And the problems that we had, I think it was last year.
We had the rain. I mean, weather was a contributing factor, yes.
Yes, and wasn't there some additional work that they found out later they had to do on one of those streets that kept it closed a little bit longer?
It was, the fact that we needed an underdrain, that was a solution we came up with, yes.
So I know for at least last 2 years, every year there's been an issue that was unanticipated. And I'm hoping that we've had the opportunity to review those issues with this contractor so that they can anticipate potential problems moving forward. Because we've heard this before,
Yes.
but yet another issue comes up and there's a big delay. So I hope that we're being thorough and learning and hopefully rechecking that database that was supposed to have been put together.
Hopefully, we're learning by our past experience.
Just in terms of, it's a related question to that, but I assume, many of the streets you can do as the whole street, you just do it all at one time, just because they're cul-de-sacs or whatever, not very long.
Right.
But El Dorado is obviously not like that, so I assume that's going to be done in segments.
3 or 4 segments, yes.
So you'll complete one so people can park someplace and then...
That's right.
Okay. And then just in terms of the crosswalks, they're going to be torn out and then replaced with what's there now, or what's your anticipation?
There's a crosswalk on Pitkin, and there's an existing crosswalk on
El Dorado.
We are leaving those in place.
Okay.
And then there's a new one, because there's 2 trail crossings of El Dorado.
Right.
There's a raised pedestrian crossing at one and not at the other.
Oh, okay.
And so we figured, well, if we're tearing out the road, we might as well replace it with a raised pedestrian crossing.
Okay, so they're structurally sound,
And
they don't need to be replaced.
TSC had a discussion about this, what to do, and to take the 2 existing ones and replace them with a newer one would have been, $50,000 to $75,000 for those 2, to combine those 2. And we felt, well, just leave them in place, is what the TSC gave me direction. So
And that could be replaced as an independent unit down the road if it got to that point, presumably.
Right. So they're not in the greatest shape. The colored concrete is, starting to show signs of wear, but to replace them would have been significant expense, so we decided.
And it was TSC's opinion that a raised crosswalk also serves as a speed bump. So it serves to slow down the traffic as well.
And then, go ahead.
So we're installing a new one, leaving the 2 existing ones in place.
Okay. And just a general question, I assume that we're following the best practices in terms of street construction based upon whatever the engineering best practices are?
Yes.
The answer, I'm sure, is yes, but
yes,
I want to make sure we're doing our best in keeping those streets around as long as possible. So, all right, any other questions? Trustee Pennington?
Yes, full depth reclamation, is that something aggregate industries has experience with, or are we going to be teaching them what we know?
They have had experience in a couple of other projects with this technique.
And you've called those references to see how?
My engineer did, yes, the engineering consultant.
Okay.
So I don't have firsthand knowledge of.
And then I have a little bit different take than others on the incentive for early finish. It's called the law of unintended consequences. If you have identified 10 days as standard and doable, is it advisable to press that faster and try to get it done in 7 days or 8 days or 9 days and give an economic incentive for doing that? To me, the law of unintended consequences is that they rush it simply to get the extra $3,000 and the work is subpar. And of course, if we discover that or it doesn't manifest itself till after 2 years, then that $3,000 is going to, bite us. So I am not in favor, if we've identified 10 days as a standard course of doing that work, to give an early completion, assuming they're fairly compensated on the front end, which it would appear they are, because they bid on it, assuming it would take 10 days. So I'm not in favor of the early
I assume that
awards, but I am in favor of the penalties if they don't meet their contractual obligation to do it in 10 days.
Just to respond, I mean, we're out there watching them, and they have to prove to us that their techniques, every time they tear up a street, before they pave, we do proof rolls and we do tests to make sure the base is compacted and to our performance standard. So we're out there watching them, and they have certain tests that they have to make before they can do the paving. So it's not like they're going to get away with it.
How do they then speed up the project 30% faster to get it done in 7 days over 10?
What our experience was last year is that they could have gotten it done, but they just didn't have the people and the equipment on site. They tore up a road and they weren't working on it. So our experience was it's not that they're rushing, they just are there and working at an expeditious rate that they're doing.
So if they had what you called a standard crew.
Standard crew and equipment that they need.
And equipment and days. How many days would it take with standard crew and standard equipment to complete on average? 10 days, 7 days, 8 days?
10 days is a comfortable period that they should be able to get it with the right crew and the right equipment. They should be able to get it with no problem with 10 days.
Right. And so you're asking them if they want the incentive, they would then send out more trucks, more workers,
I can do that.
and you're confident we can keep quality in check?
Yes.
Okay.
And presumably they bid on this as part of their
It was in the
bid
spec.
packets, right? So,
So all their prices were based on what we had in this schedule of bonuses and incentives. So to take those out now would be...
Right, okay, including a potential $54,000 extra for early completion. Okay.
Trustee Williams?
So I'm happy that we have what we call a capital improvements projects plan, that we have like a 5-year, 10-year, or 20-year. And we use that as our guideline every year as to what streets we actually decide that we are going to replace or improve. And while that's nice to have, I think that it shouldn't take precedence over streets that are absolutely necessary to replace. So while we work away and chip away at this plan that we have, I think we need to take into consideration of what streets truly, truly need to be improved or completely replaced. And when I look at these streets, to me, El Dorado, maybe, but most of the other streets, I think, could wait. And that I think this is a lot of money, $2.7 million. And we have Colton Road and we have Indiana that need it far more than these little streets. And so I would really rather see us take some of this money and actually work on what is truly necessary. Like if you have, a business or a home and you over time create a plan of what you're going to do each year to improve your property. It's typically you don't go with, well, this one's the oldest, so we're going to replace this. You go with basically what is falling apart, what really truly needs to be replaced in your home or your business, and you replace that. So I'd kind of like to see us take that tactic a little bit more than just following our little plan that we have. And I think it's great, and I think we can chip away at it. But at this point, I think $2.7 million on a bunch of streets that don't really need it, I have a hard time with that.
So I guess my only comment about that is, and I assume that that's the way that you deal with this. And, Pitkin, for example, is a mess. So I can't see how Pitkin would be taken off the list.
Whatever street you want to put on there, but,
And El Dorado is going to be the biggest chunk of change, and I can't imagine not doing
Huge.
El Dorado, so.
but, we have Indiana and we have Colton Road, and we're talking roller coaster ride.
We have a lot of roads that need attention,
And we have a lot that we don't need
Right.
attention.
and
So I would rather take that approach than just having our little plan that we, chip away at every year, and yet 2 years out, we're going to actually finally replace the ones that truly need it. So those are my thoughts. It's a completely different tactic, but with 2.7 million, this is the highest, this is the most we've spent. And every year, we spend a little bit more. I think I remember the first one was like 1.1, and then 1.3, 1.5, 1.8, 2.1. Now we're at 2.7, and it's making me nervous, and I'm feeling we're just spending too much.
I think the big picture is that, I agree that these dollar figures are sometimes hard to swallow, but the big picture capital for roads, I think, is greater than $20 million. So this, I think we all knew that this was going to be a lot of money for a long time, so.
Yeah.
I'm not
Trustee-
saying not spend it.
Yeah. Trustee Goodgross?
I agree with your approach. I guess the only thing I would disagree with, you've called it a little plan. This is not a little plan. This is a huge plan, actually. So unless you're being facetious or sarcastic, this is not a little plan. It's a huge expense. It's going to be going on year after year after year, so. But it's, some winters are different than others. There's one street that you didn't anticipate going downhill as quickly, and all of a sudden, here we are in the spring of 2013. You might find another street that you hadn't put in specifically for this summer to work, but, that makes sense. If something broke in my house and I was going to do something else, I'm going to fix that first before I go back to my plan. That's just the common
Thank you.
sense.
That is the basis of my thoughts here. And I see a lot of these are not broken at this time.
We do, as you just described, when we go through every year, look at the streets, look at the ones that, as you mentioned, we didn't think needed it next year, but now looking at it again does need it, and we revise the plans based on that. And then we have one more year of this level of probably street maintenance improvement, and then the budget starts to decrease on a significant level on years extending past 2014. So we're almost there to where.
It's good to know.
But then we have McCaslin to do.
There's always something. And every year we go through and we try to decide which needs it the most and propose that.
And I appreciate that, and I understand all that, but if you ask residents, they're going to look at this and say, you're kidding me. I would rather have Colton Road and Indiana by the schools repaired than these little cul-de-sacs and little streets. We heard that. We heard that in the transportation plan. We heard that in a number of different public meetings. So I'm just throwing that out.
Indiana looks pretty bad by Superior. That's a mess.
By Superior Elementary?
Where there was all parking.
I would say that Indiana, over by the firehouse, is
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
Because of the undulation, yeah.
Sure.
Trustee Pennington has
roller
speed bump.
coaster ride there. If you go fast enough, you can just really get in.
Speed bump.
The point's very well made that obviously the number of cars on a road is greater for the major thoroughfares of Colton and Indiana and McCaslin and Rock Creek Parkway, et cetera. So where and consequently, they need repair more often than a 5-year cycle because they're used that much more. It makes intuitive sense to me anyway that the more it's used, the more frequently it needs to be repaired. So how do we fit the major thoroughfares into this plan?
Well, I think our strategy, it's 2 years. Next year, we're kind of done with the neighborhoods and local streets. And then we can, tackle Indiana, Colton, 88th, McCaslin. So, there's a bunch of the arterials that, last year what we did, with McCaslin was, we did a kind of a maintenance project to do a slurry seal to hold that together until we could get to it. And, what we're trying to do is get out of the neighborhood so we can get back to those roads and provide some maintenance there. Some of them have been unattended for a while.
I have to say, I still have a bad taste in my mouth from 2 years ago when I felt like we repaired stuff that didn't need to be repaired, particularly hairline cracks and concrete work. And certainly, we trustees got enough emails on that saying they just tore out perfectly good sidewalk, perfectly good curb and gutter and whatnot. I'm assuming your staff has driven these streets, walked these streets, and identified them as absolutely needing repairs, and we're not just doing it because they're on a schedule.
The concrete work that we're doing are really drainage issues. If you can see some of the curb and gutter that we have, it's failing and it's causing drainage issues that is affecting the road. So those are the types of concrete work that we're doing, is to address the drainage problems so the gutters flow, and you don't have these low spots where the water sits and affects the road. So those are the type. The hairline.
That's the
cracks.
approach we took last year.
Right, right. And yeah, I can support that approach, but the previous approach never has sat very well with me. And prior to the year in question, for example, when the streets in my neighborhood were done, the concrete work was not repaired as a matter of course. We just did the streets there. And as a consequence, when you walk around some of the neighborhoods south of Colton that are now, let's say, 4 years out or whatever, there's quite a bit of sidewalk and curb and gutter damage over there. Is that going to have to wait to be repaired until the next cycle at which you do those streets? Or can that be looked at independently and done on an as-needed basis?
We normally take requests for those and include them in this project. We didn't have that many requests coming from the public, so there aren't as many this year as they have been in the past. But
I'll get the word out about those requests, okay?
Requests in, and then we look at
Okay.
it and try to.
I guess just one final comment. I think, we had a rough summer a couple summers ago, and we had some hiccups. I'm okay in general giving companies and people a second chance as long as we've learned something from it. I wouldn't want to repeat the same mistakes this summer, plain and simple.
You mean from last summer?
Was it last summer or the summer
Yeah,
before
it was
that?
great
Oh,
report. Yeah.
It was
2 years in a row.
okay. Last summer, I thought it was 2
That was the worst, for
with
sure.
what
Yeah, that was the
specifically?
worst.
That's the one that I don't know. That sticks in my
Yeah.
mind 2 years ago. But. So I hope we've learned something from it, that's all.
Trustee Hanson?
I didn't hear the answer to this, but you may have already addressed it. I'm sorry if you did, but I agree with Deborah Williams about Indiana there, to me, that's one of the worst stretches of streets in town. Why wouldn't you choose that one to at least do that section, or would you have to tear up the whole street all the way up, and would it be more work than you could do? And you want to finish the area that you're talking about
Right.
because it's
Well,
proximity.
We had an option, we awarded Schedules A through C. We had a Schedule D that included patching on Indiana up by the fire station and patching and slurry of Coal Creek Drive. That would have cost another $180,000 on top of this. So we had bid prices for it, and so we decided to get out of the neighborhoods, do El Dorado Drive and do Arbors and Hillside. So we do have a price for that, to do Coal Creek and to do the Indiana. But it's just up by the fire station, just patching where we have that big tip. And I think the thought there was, let's get this done. If we have any savings, we can always add that on if we come up with any savings in any of these items.
And Alex and his staff last year, maybe some this year, have been investigating the cause for that on that road.
Yeah, we think we have a water leak up there, and we haven't found it yet. So we've been digging holes to try to get to the root of the problem before we just...
Before you go in and that makes sense, okay.
So we're not quite there yet on that Indiana. That's why we didn't include it right now.
Okay.
If we find a problem, then we we have some money left over, we may come back and say we want to do it this year. But right now, we don't know what the problem is.
Okay. Any public comment regarding this issue? Any further board questions or comments? Board action? Anybody? Trustee Hansen?
I'd like to make a motion, Town of Superior Resolution Number R-25,
25.
Series 2013, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving a construction contract with Aggregate Industries Western Region, Inc. for the 2013 street rehabilitation program.
Motion by Trustee Hansen. Is there a second? Trustee Sorelli, any further board discussion? Seeing none, Phyllis?
Hanson,
Yes.
Gregores,
Yes.
Sirelli,
Yes.
Muckle,
Yes.
Pennington,
Yes.
Skumac,
Yes.
Williams.
No.
Okay. Well, that brings us to item number 10, preliminary approval of an ordinance amending 16-15-30 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding financial guarantees for public improvements warranties. Mr. Magley.
Thank you, Mayor. The board initially reviewed this ordinance at the April 8th meeting, and based on that discussion, staff made some revisions and is bringing it back again for your initial review, and then, depending on the discussion tonight, we'll bring it back, a final reading on May 13th. As background, the Superior Municipal Code requires a developer to provide certain financial guarantees in the form of a development agreement, contract, or other security arrangement to ensure the completion of public improvements. These items are typically required by most municipalities for public improvements, and also cover the warranty period, which can range from, depending on the city, anywhere from 1 year up to 3 years we've seen for certain warranty periods. The board had asked to see a comparison of what other cities require for the guarantee. Paul Mills, our finance director, has provided that for you in your packet, looking at the city of Boulder, Broomfield, Erie, Lafayette, Louisville, and Thornton. Based on the information that we had as a comparison, we revised the ordinance we took out the language that we proposed on April 8th, which was new language, and simply amended section 16-15-30, the warranty period language, to add, well, I'll just read it, the section. The revised section 16-15-30 warranty language states, the applicant shall warrant all public improvements for 2 years from preliminary acceptance by the town. The warranty shall be secured by cash, a letter of credit, or other performance guarantee acceptable to the town in the amount of 15% of the cost of construction of the public improvements. We're not suggesting any other revisions to this section regarding the securities. And based on that, open it up for board discussion, questions. Paul Mills, our finance director, is here as well.
Great. So I'll take the first bite at this one, and I assume I also know the answer to this, but the town staff feels comfortable that this protects us enough compared to the 50% that we've had in the past?
Yes. I mean, the thought there is that we've done our work as the public improvements are going in. We're comfortable with the work that's been done to accept it, and it's anticipated that the improvements will not fail at that point if we haven't done our work before or if we're not happy, or we're not satisfied with the public improvements when they're installed. We're not going to accept them.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Skumatz.
I think I have some of the same problems I had last time, which is this, or other performance guarantee is just too vague to me, and I'm not comfortable with that. And I wouldn't have done a race to the bottom to 15%. I would have done something like 25% to be in. That still halves our value. I'm happy with 50, frankly, but I have a problem with 15.
Thank you.
And the language that you see there in this section is, as far as the or other performance guarantee, is it language that's already in the is it the 20? in section 161520, so we just mimicked that language.
Trustee
Say
Hanson.
that, can I have you repeat that, Matt?
In section 161520, where it states, secured, public improvements shall be secured by cash, letter of credit, or other performance guarantee. That's how it reads in section 161520, so we mimicked that language in 161530.
And since we don't have that in front of us, what does that topic cover?
That, just the public improvements, the cost of public improvements.
The 110%?
The 110%.
You're saying that this has never been changed, right? This is the old code, for what you just read, right?
This is,
The italics are new?
The italics are new, yes.
the italics are new.
So section 16-15-20, number 3, one or more security arrangements, including irrevocable letters of credit, cash, or other performance guarantees acceptable to the town. That is the old code.
That's current.
It's current code,
That's
today's
current
code.
Yep.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
what I wanted to know.
Trustee Hanson.
Yeah, Matt, last meeting, I thought you were going to check with Ranch Capital and see how they were going to secure, what their intention was. I mean, what format of security did they want to do?
Their language, and we got language from them, and
It did not specify.
It left it open-ended. It was open-ended. Other acceptable guarantee to the town is their language.
Yes, we tried to get a list of things that they might want to use, and they did not provide one.
Did they just misunderstand the question, or did they?
They provided the language instead.
Okay.
I was pretty specific.
Okay.
Trustee Williams.
What was that language specifically?
That they wanted?
Correct.
It was very similar, but I will find it and get it for you.
Trustee Bennington.
Well, again, I'm new to all these letters of credit and all that kind of stuff, but when you have to put up 110% of something, perhaps we're more liberal in those types of cash or options or other performance guarantees than when we lower it down to 50% for the 2-year warranty period. I don't know what the history of that difference in wording is, and I'm a little reluctant to equate them here in Section 20 and Section 30 until I understand the history. Were we just lax in not having that wording in 20 to begin with, or was there a reason it was not in 20?
It's in 20.
It's in 20.
It wasn't. It's not currently in 30, which is what we're
But
discussing.
was there a reason behind
What I
that?
just asked.
It was just an oversight, is my assumption. Seems you would have the same language in both sections.
And then 20 shouldn't have had it.
So that's how I'm thinking.
Their language was such other forms of security or other performance guarantees. So it's very similar.
I mean, if, maybe Paul can get up and speak to this, but if you're more comfortable saying secured by cash, letter of credit, or bond proceeds, which is what they're looking for.
Did I hear correctly last meeting that certain types of performance guarantees are more secure for the town than others? I thought I heard that cash and letters of credit are preferable.
Yeah.
And then they stair-step downward in terms of the ability for non-performance. So,
Like a performance bond is
It's at the very bottom.
it's very
It's
bottom.
It's worth the paper
Which is
it's
why
written on.
it's not something we allow.
well, but we could if we add this vague language or other performance guarantee.
Yes, we could.
Whatever deal we make.
Right. So that, again, opens everything up to negotiation and
Has to be acceptable to us.
I mean, in
Not to
our
us,
minds,
just
Yes,
the
it
future
does
board.
have to be the board.
So can you go back to what the
Any
developer
future.
asked you, what the language he would like to see in here?
It's basically the same. It is such other forms of security or other performance guarantees. as approved by the Board of Trustees.
So they don't care about that 15%, or the 50%, or 25%?
They didn't change that. No, they didn't change the 50%.
That means nothing to them.
They didn't change the 50 or 15?
They left it at 50 in their proposal.
50.
Right.
50.
So, okay.
Seems strange.
So
Yeah, they did, yeah.
that does not matter to them. That's
No.
not what their problem is, correct?
No, I mean,
Not based on what
not
we
based
got.
on what they sent.
Okay.
And just to be clear, we're not negotiating our code with a developer. We are doing a code change that makes sense
For our town.
for our town for forever.
Into the
So,
future.
Yes.
That's-
So,
Correct.
This is, we got a proposed code revision from them, which is not what we asked for. We asked for a list of possible other items that they would like to see in here. Instead of doing that, they did their own rewrite.
okay. Trustee Pennington.
I'm reading from the cover memo for item number 10, which is this item, the bottom indented paragraph, which apparently is what they asked for on March 11, 2013 in the developer agreement. And I'm confused because the third sentence says, shall include options for letter of credit and the escrow of district bond proceeds. So shall include is pretty definitive. It means it shall include. But the very next sentence says the town board shall consider an amendment to allow for deviations. Those two are at odds to me in that paragraph. What did they ask us for? Simply to consider something, or did they say shall include? Are you finding that?
Mm-hmm. They contradict one another.
Section
5.1.
In addition, here's what it says in the agreement, the development agreement that you all approved. In addition to cash deposits and any other forms of security acceptable under the town code, the form of construction completion guarantees for public improvements, including for warranties accepted by the town, shall include options for letters of credit and the escrow of district bond proceeds. On or before May 13, 2013, the town board shall consider an amendment to the town code to allow for deviations from the security requirements of the town code on a case-by-case basis, upon the submission of justification to the town board.
So the top half seemed to bind us to a shall include, and the bottom half said we should consider ones.
To get to the binding part that you already agreed to, we have to consider an amendment to the code. That's what it's saying. The problem is that we can't agree in an agreement to change the code because only you can change the code sitting up there as you're doing right now. We can agree in an agreement that we will accept certain arrangements, but we also first have to agree that we will consider an amendment to the town code. I'm not making, no?
Part I'm making the face about, which is you're reacting to, is the part about, wait a minute, if we don't change the code, then we can't accept any specialty.
Right, okay, exactly.
And
We
I
already
have one
agreed to accept the alternatives.
All right, good. And then the question I have is for Mr. Nellis, and that is the part about, so escrow of, district, or I don't care, escrow of bond proceeds, is that basically a bank account that has the entire bond proceeds in the amount that we're looking for? Is that a bank account with X dollars that are essentially cash? And if so, I have had a hard time figuring out why bond proceeds, the amount that you get isn't essentially cash.
Paul Millis, town staff. Trustee Skumatz and board, we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, and for clarification, I think for our audience more than anything else, I think it's to some degree subject to interpretation. I, similar to you, Trustee Skumatz, would interpret it in a similar fashion. If in fact bonds are going to be issued and revenues generated, proceeds from those bonds are generated, and they go into an escrow account for this particular service.
As we did with the open space fund, we got $6 million or whatever we got that we could start spending on. It was cash sitting there that we could start spending on open space. that we were obligated to pay back. Here, we'd be talking about a bank account again with the total amount of dollars sitting in that bank account that we had, and if they are obligated to pay back.
In my mind, yes. But not having seen it, they may have other designs on it. It may be an escrow account that may have multiple purposes. I don't know. I don't know.
So we'd have to say, if we wanted to have anything like that happen, it would have to say dedicated escrow or something like that. Or singularly dedicated.
I think staff would absolutely recommend that.
Yeah.
But, until we see it, we can't give a definitive opinion on it.
I'm just uncomfortable with this other performance guarantee. If it was bond proceeds that were cash-like and dedicated, that to me is cash. I don't quite see the distinction there, but this other performance guarantee is just too open to me. It's not cash.
Can I ask you a question, Lisa, though? Even if we say that and we agree to that, we still have the option, though, to review it and then decide whether we want to allow them to do that. So even though it's open, it'll still come back to us, and we can decide then.
And my concern is the same one I raised last time, which is if we leave it open like that, then that becomes a negotiation point, and I don't want a negotiation point on this, as well as every other thing that a developer tries to squeeze out of town.
Okay.
Trustee Pennington?
So, Paul, if that language were tightened up to say, or other cash equivalent, as determined by the board, what does that do?
My first reaction to that is that you'd have to define what a cash equivalent is.
Like not junk bonds.
Well, but that's easier to determine than the adequacy of this vague other performance guarantee, because a cash equivalent's a cash equivalent. To me, that's somewhat easy to identify.
It's a letter of credit, I think.
It could, I think it all could be subject to some level of interpretation until we get to the specific definition or the specific agreement of what the instrument is. Is it cash? Is it an acceptable investment that the town invests in, commercial paper, federal home loan, things of that nature? And then it could continue to extend out to other instruments that it could be gold, it could be whatever the case is that some would view as a cash equivalent. So there would be some level of ambiguity until specifically we identify what the instrument is.
But at least our intent is clearer to future boards. That's my concern. We're all up here for a limited term, and we want language, as I interpret, to stand the test of time, with as little ambiguity about our intent as possible. And the other performance guarantee is, to me, very vague.
Other board questions or comments?
Yeah.
Trustee Cirelli?
Well, I guess Mr. Niles could step up. The logic of settling on 15% as opposed to 25%, was that a dart or?
I would like to think not. As the manager identified, we did our diligence from the perspective of what many other municipalities consider to be a reasonable warranty or a reasonable surety during the warranty period. In addition, we have to have obviously some comfort level that staff is in fact doing its job, and I think we have that level of comfort. So what we were trying to identify is a surety amount during the warranty period that was somewhat consistent with what other municipalities do, just for, and that it's not always how we drive our policies, but it's one item that typically we look at. And I think from that particular summary, we identified that of that particular summary, only one of the entities was at 50% for construction projects, and that being, I think it's working, I think that was Lafayette. And then they varied anywhere between typically 10 and 20% for the balance. So it was an imputed average between those as a municipal standard, essentially. I can't stand up here and opine to you, Trustee Cirelli, about what the right number is, but we feel this is truly this is a reasonable number and it is a consistent number. In addition to it, our 15%, depending upon that that last addition that we're proposing to be put in the code, or that our letter of credit or cash provision now is stronger than 3 of those other 6 who provide the issuance of performance bonds to meet their 15% requirement.
And who thought it was funny that Broomfield had a shorter length of time for public improvements than for landscaping? Anyway.
So, okay. So basically, they're thinking we need 15% to cover what we think might go wrong.
Might go wrong. And from our experience, again, as the manager articulated, our experience, and we can't use Calmonte as an experience, that was a unique time, but our experience is both the 10% and the 15% have worked. They've been, or I'm sorry, the 110% and the 50% have worked, but we have never, at least in my tenure here, never approached that 50% number for the warranty period. I mean, typically it's in low single figures is the amount you're looking for repair work during the warranty period. And the contractor, or the developer, absent Calmonte development, has always done it without us looking at getting into the cash or letter of credit.
And what I would say is that if we needed essentially 50% of a project redone, then we haven't done our work. So, I mean, I can't imagine that if we ever got to that point, we have a lot bigger problems than the number in the document. Trustee Scammons?
And I get that, but I also look at how unhappy our residents are with houses that they're on, and the whole issue with driveways and all that sort of stuff. So I guess we can have inspection, but we can't always see everything that's going to happen. And so I'm the more the better from my perspective, and I definitely wouldn't want to race to the bottom of 15. There were several at 20 and 25%, and I don't see why we couldn't be at 25% as well.
Okay.
And the cost of redoing is always more expensive than doing it right in the first place. So, I don't know what those numbers are, but you've referenced now twice, except for Calmonte. So could you educate me on why Calmonte is an exception?
Just from an exception from the ability to draw on that letter of credit. We just had a situation where a bank failed. So that was the situation with Calmonte, where we had not accepted the improvements. The developer had gone defunct. The bank actually had written the letter of credit, acquired the parcel, or partially acquired the parcel with FDIC, and then that bank failed. So essentially, we have no ability to draw on that letter of credit. That was, I'm sorry.
And we've got subpar public improvements? Have we determined a problem?
No.
Just so we couldn't.
We've not accepted them, but additionally, we have no surety.
We did not reject them, however.
That is correct.
Because they were incomplete?
Correct.
Okay.
But, and the Calmonte analogy probably is not fair for this discussion, but just from the perspective that in that particular case, we no longer even have a letter of credit that was provided because the bank failed. So
right.
Maybe the FDIC will.
So cash would have been better.
Who owns that infrastructure?
Right now, the FDIC.
So we don't plow those. We don't maintain those roads. We don't do anything to those roads. Or any of the sewer there or anything. The sewer systems that are there?
Sewer goes to our system, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
So we maintain that, though.
well, there's, maybe jetting or something like that needs to be done. We'll do that because that's our infrastructure. Even though we haven't accepted them, we want to make sure that they're still operable.
So this is a preliminary reading. It sounds like the discussion points when it comes back for final would be the percentage that people feel comfortable with, and you could pick those off a la carte if you like, and then whether or not there's any other guarantee that the board would like to see brought back also at that time. I personally can't think of one, but although gold bullion seemed pretty good.
Not right now. It's down about 30%. Yeah. But if you bought it at 400, it's a good deal if you're still hanging on to it. So my question is, did we find it uncompetitive in the real world, in real life, in trying to attract developers, to be at 50%. What are we responding to? I thought we were responding to Ranch Capital's desires, but as Deborah's line of questioning pointing it out, they never disputed the 50%. They just wanted alternative means of supplying the 50%. So I'm a bit confused as to why we're even having this discussion.
Well, there's a couple things there. In early on discussions with Ranch Capital, it was discussed, the 50%, even though, for whatever reason, in the language they provided us, they didn't address it. The second thing is, it's a pretty competitive market out there, and I think, as Paul mentioned, it's a reasonable, something less than 50% is more reasonable with not just Ranch Capital, but any future developer, as long as we're doing our work, inspections, to make sure those public improvements are put in the correct way. So, and just like in any code revisions, we take a look at all the information that's available and look at other cities and what they're doing and want to be reasonable in our requests with not only developers, but citizens and whoever else we're dealing with. So, and that's how we came to the 50% in our discussions.
So if we, as a board, said we're only comfortable dropping it to the top of our competitors, which is 25%, how would you respond?
That would be acceptable to me.
Sold. No, just kidding.
Does the amount of that 15% or 50%, will that determine how they'll secure it? What type of vehicle they'll use? Because that's a big number at 50%.
It is. It is. And no, currently it's got to be cash or letter of credit. In the future, we don't typically accept performance bonds, so it's going to be letter of credit, cash, or some other form of, I don't know.
But someone like Ranch Capital, would they, at 50%, would they say, okay, that's so much that we have to use some type of bonds? But if it's at 15%, would they say, well, that's actually doable, we could do a line of credit with that?
That's a possibility.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
But that's not the language they included.
That is not.
This time.
Yeah.
So I think that we probably should move off this topic since we'll be looking at it again. So do people want to change the percentage tonight or think about it some more? Or
Well, I'd kind of like to see 25% myself.
Okay. So why don't we entertain a motion and go from there?
Well, do we
Unless
want to
there's- yeah.
add that?
So I was thinking that if we're going to do 25%, then we could possibly keep the performance bond in. But if we're going to do 15%, we can eliminate the performance bond.
No performance bond. That's the weakest of the things.
But Boulder, Lafayette, Thornton does it. I'm just saying, that's the negotiation.
Well, I guess we could
the
negotiate
language as
it,
it's
but-
written, it does say other performance guarantee acceptable to the town. So I suppose if the town at the time determines that a performance bond is acceptable because for some magical reason performance bonds are better 5 years from now, then this would allow you to accept a performance bond.
Gives the choice.
I actually would just stage it. I don't know if this was where you were going, Chris, but I would drop it to 25, keep the language as it was, which is cash or letter of credit, and see whether or not, with the lower percentage requirement, we even run into any future problem.
Well, you'd have to leave, if you want to have a discussion about that, you need to include the option to have those discussions in the code. Otherwise, you've eliminated that as an option.
Right, and that's contrary to the language of the development agreement.
Right.
Pardon?
You have to give yourself some latitude. If it's just black and white in the code, then you have no option of having a discussion.
No, Kendra assured us numerous times, all we've got to do is consider a change. But
Well,
that change we actually
That's absolutely
made.
true.
That is true. If you do not make the change, then it will be a violation of the development agreement. Because the development agreement requires you to accept district bond proceeds, for example.
But that's right where I went with the shell, and you told me that this first, all that did was obligate us if we choose to make a change.
Okay, I thought I might not have been as clear as I could have been. You are obligated to accept district bond proceeds, escrow of district bond proceeds, under the development agreement as you've already approved it. However, from a legal perspective, you can't
do that right now.
you can't obligate yourselves in the development agreement to change your code. That's why those two sections appear differently in that agreement. So all we could say is you must consider a code amendment by May 13th. If you all don't adopt a code amendment by May 13th, you will be in violation of the development agreement.
I thought it was, we had to consider
That's how I understood it.
agreement, a change. I thought that was what you said. And with those bond, sorry.
Yeah.
And when that agreement came forward, it was like 6 or 8 or something items that we should be alerted to. Was that language one of those items? I don't remember that being in there as one of those that you pointed out in specific.
I'll look at the...
I don't remember it because I know that...
I know we talked about it, but I'm not sure. I can look back and see.
So what happens if we do the warranty, we leave the warranty at 50%, and we add, or other acceptable performance, whatever the language is, to town, under the guarantee type? What if we did that?
That would be acceptable.
That would be
Fine,
acceptable, even though we left it at 50%?
Yes, they've not asked, their attorney did not ask for anything less than 50.
So let me ask you this, what does that, does it, the 50%, 5%, 0, what, does it even matter?
Yes.
When it comes to a performance bond? Does it matter what the percentage is for the warranty?
For the performance bond, or
any-
you're talking about letter of credit or cash, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you have a performance bond, and you have it at 100%, or you have it at 15%.
If you have a guarantee,
Right.
Are
at
you,
a certain number.
are you better protected at 100%, even though it's a performance bond? Or does it, it's a wash, it doesn't make any difference?
You need to have enough cash available to make the corrections that you need to do if the warrant, if
But the
there's a warranty
performance bond is
issue.
saying to you that that is not a true guarantee, that it has less credibility. So whether you have it at 50% for the warranty or 100% for the warranty, it really means nothing. It's just a number, because this performance bond is not actual cash.
For that one type of security, that's true. But cash, 50% is far better than 15,
Right.
or for a letter of credit. So you're right. Right now, the stated performance bonds are that they're worthless. That may change in the future, but you're right. Right now, the performance bond could be 100%. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make it any better than 50%. You're exactly right. And back to Trustee Skumatz's, yes, my memo did specifically point out that this was a section I would not want to agree to in the development agreement.
So,
Why did
so
you?
there's language I would be willing to accept and language I wouldn't be able to accept. I can live with 25% if necessary, since we're looking into the future, and I personally am totally happy not being competitive on all things. I want development to be very secure, and I could live with 50, but if people want to reduce it, I would be very uncomfortable going below 25. But the language I can't live with is what's in the italics there, with the or other performance guarantee. I could live with something like, and the escrow of sole, or in the sole dedicated escrow of bond proceeds. I could live with that, because to me that seems cash equivalent, and it doesn't open the door to God knows what else.
And it complies with the development agreement.
And it does.
Right.
But I would need to say something like sole, dedicated, unmultiply, dedicated type of thing. I would need it to have some kind of qualifier.
If this is what the board, we can certainly look into some language that both satisfies the development agreement, and I think I understand your concern.
And the reason I want to hash this out a little bit is I don't believe I'm at the meeting on the 13th. So.
Oh.
That's why I went to the language of cash equivalent.
And that to me is open to interpretation as well. Junk bonds worth of it could be cash equivalent at the time, and so that's a problem.
But I agree the current language is too vague, the current proposed language of other performance guarantees too vague. I'm frankly disappointed, because it seems like our hands are tied here, when I thought we had been assured that our hands were not tied. So,
Well, I guess the disappointment should be yours in not dealing with it at the time.
well, I'm disappointed in myself, or however, but now the frustration is upon us, and it needs to be dealt with.
So there's wide board support for 25% tonight, right? You can,
I frankly am okay with the other performance guarantee language, because I don't think we should be tying future boards' hands that much if we're going to give discretion.
But future
I agree
boards
with
could
Joe.
have the choice of changing it then.
Then they have to change the code.
Yeah, and they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is more in the flavor, I think, of what exists currently, the stiffer language.
So I think I agree with where Trustee Sorelli was on this. I mean, I can't imagine, I know we all think we're going to be the best board ever, and we know what's going to be best for the future, but I feel very confident that any board made up of residents of the town of Superior are going to know what to do, and they're not going to just say, I'd like it all guaranteed in bubble gum. I feel pretty confident that our advisors will not let us do that.
And my problem is the developer side. My problem is not the boards, but if that door is the least bit open like that, then the developer is going to push. And the developer's going to push hard.
Yeah, but you just say no.
But they're not going to have the backing. They're not going to have the backing that they have by saying, oh, our code doesn't let us have that, do that.
Well, we did just get pushed.
Yeah.
We got rushed through something that we didn't fully understand, and here we are. So,
I'd like to keep the door as closed as possible.
Well, can I just say that I think I understood this particular issue, so.
all right, how do we proceed?
Well, I'd recommend, since it's a preliminary, to pick the number, it sounds like 25%.
25% is,
And then we can keep we can either have the language as suggested by Trustee Skumatz, or leave the language as suggested by staff, or...
I'm in favor of leaving the language as recommended by staff right now.
Did staff's language, didn't it have a recommendation of 15%?
Well, yeah, we
No, not
suggested
15%, but
25.
I'm sorry, giving you flexibility.
Because I'm fine with 15 or 20%, so if anybody else is fine. But if they're not concerned about even 50%, then 25%, I guess, is fine.
So with that, we'll entertain a motion. Trustee Sorelli, I see your hand being raised.
Yeah, I'll give it a stab if I can find the language here. I move to approve a preliminary ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior amending Section 16-15-30, public improvements warranty is set forth the following language. The applicant shall warrant all public improvements for 2 years from preliminary acceptance. The warranty shall be secured by cash, a letter or credit, or other performance guarantee acceptable to the town in the amount of 25% of the costs of construction of the public improvements.
Okay, that's a motion by Trustee Sorelli. Second by Trustee Gregoris. Further discussion? All in favor? So Hanson, Sorelli, Buckle, Gregoris, opposed, Skumatz, Williams, Pennington. So that motion carries. And we'll see this, when will we see this again? Okay.
Day what?
13.
13.
All right. Thank you. Good conversation. That brings us to item number 11, preliminary approval of an ordinance amending 16-1-70 and Section 16-19-70 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding handheld signs on non-residential property. Mr. Magley and or...
Well, I was going to say, never in the history of the Superior Town Board have we had two back-to-back preliminary approvals of ordinances that could be as diverse as these two in terms of their weight to the future of this town. So I think this discussion will be a lot different than the first
And I
one.
feel very confident in voting for both of these in the way that I feel confident. So,
Mr. Magley, go ahead and give us
Thank you. This item came up on April 8th as well as part of the sign code amendments that were reviewed by the Planning Commission. This was one item that the Planning Commission recommended not proceeding with. The board's direction was for staff to draft language for the board to consider, which we have done for you. Currently, the town code, sign code, does not allow handheld signs on private, non-residential property within town. The amended language that's before you tonight will primarily impact 3 commercially zoned areas within the town, which are the Superior Marketplace, Rock Creek Village, Colton Crossing, and Superior Plaza, which is actually 4, so sorry about that, and the future town center as well. The proposed changes to the code include, under definitions, a new definition was added for handheld sign, which states that it means a sign which is designed to be held by or attached to an individual. And in the definition of portable sign, the following language was deleted, which was also the following language, also including a sign displaying a commercial message held by, attached to, or affixed on an individual who is exhibiting such sign for the predominant purpose of conveying the commercial message on such sign. The new section 16-1970, signs on non-residential property, include the following with regard to handheld signs. Size, the area of the handheld sign shall not exceed 6 square feet. Location, handheld signs are permitted on private, non-residential property with the permission of the property owner, but handheld signs are not permitted on public property or in the public right-of-way, and neither handheld signs nor the person carrying such signs shall visually or physically obstruct, impede, or block the flow of traffic or pedestrians on streets or sidewalks. 3, number of handheld signs, 1 is allowed per person carrying the sign. The duration, handheld signs are permitted between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on no more than 2 days in any 7-day period. And last, other handheld signs shall be held by a person at all times. A person holding a sign shall not conduct sales, transfer product, or collect monies of any kind. We also included a chart that's in the code 16-1970, which just summarizes the information that I just read to you. Staff is recommending against the ordinance due to the unknown effectiveness of the signs, the visual sign clutter that we think it'll create, potential distractions to drivers, and the enforcement challenges that it may cause. Let's see, I mentioned the Planning Commission's recommendation, so with that, we open it up to board discussion and comment.
Thank you, Trustee Williams.
So how does this address signs that are not handheld, that may be like a little A-frame sign that they put out of their specials?
So the code currently allows temporary signs on private property.
Temporary, only the 72 hours?
No, for...
Portable, you mean, I think, right?
No, temporary.
Yeah, there's portable
Like
signs.
A-frame signs. that you
Sandwich boards.
described.
Not to be confused with temporary that we just dealt with.
Right, up to 45 days, actually.
So that's already been taken care of?
It's in the code currently, yeah.
Deborah, he did put a limitation on it, 45 days.
So every 45 days, you need to take it in?
So, yeah, it's under section 16-1970 of the code, and I'm looking to see. So it says duration, temporary signs may be displayed for a period of up to 45 consecutive days or as permitted during election season.
And then
each temporary sign has to include the date the sign was first displayed in the lower right-hand corner.
So then what happens after the 45 days?
They would have to take it down for a day and
Put it back up?
put it back up.
One day?
It's 45 consecutive days, it says.
Okay.
Trustee Hanson?
Number 4, duration. Handheld signs are permitted between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on no more than 2 days in any 7-day period. So is that per business, or per person holding the sign, or the sign? So could you change the sign and be out there the next day spinning it? And
Yeah, part of the issue with this ordinance is we're not allowed to regulate signs based on content. So we can't limit anything on the sign itself.
Okay.
That's the problem that we have in trying to draft this type of regulation.
Okay, so to me, the way I read this is that there's only 2 days out of the week that you can do signs. Is that every single business, 2 days, or?
Can they all do them on the same day?
Yeah, can they all do them on the same day, or do? Sure. So, but then the business, so we're limited to the business, not the person who's doing it for the business.
Right.
Is that, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know, I agree with you.
So you have 5 employees. Could you have one employee out one day, another employee another day, another employee another day, so 5 days in a row, and then redo the cycle? Or is it, so Juju's Bakery can do for 2 days only during a 7-day period, and they have to let you know, or to let the town know what 2 days those are going to be?
Yeah, I mean, the way this is drafted, it should be per property, per non-residential property, but that's going to be difficult too, because how do we determine how many signs you get per property? You're exactly right.
So why did we put that language in, the 2 of 7? Why not, why put it in? If it's not enforceable.
Some parameters on how to, I mean, you could take that out completely.
Yeah, you know.
This was a dart. I mean, really, this was a shot in the dark, because, again, this ordinance had not gone to planning commission in any form, so we were putting this together for you to consider. The timeframes, the number, how many days, that's all up to you.
So, I've been traveling south a lot in the last month, and I've been seeing a ton of sign spinners. And the more I see them, I mean, I see a lot of them smoking, and it's just really bad. So now I'm starting to rethink this whole thing. But I'm wondering, can we say, let's just try this as an experiment, see what happens through summer, and just adopt it? I would take out number 4 because it's confusing. But can we just adopt this, and let's let the businesses go to work and see if it works or not, and then let's revisit it in August and evaluate it.
Trustee Bennington?
So run a test market in it, or run a beta on it, et cetera, et cetera. And I might go about it a different way. Can we temporarily vacate the enforcement of a rule while we test a proposed rule and give it the summer to see what problems turn up or don't turn up before we change the code?
I think some planning commission, I'm
Right.
not speaking for the planning commission, but my
Right.
interpretation was that, and others, that all of a sudden we could have a gazillion sign spinners out, and it's very distracting, and it doesn't look good.
Right.
But I would say that we're probably not. We're probably going to have a couple out during each week.
My, I thought the representation was made somewhere that Planning Commission had already looked at this, and
Well,
on public.
they did. They discussed whether it should be allowed, and they decided to recommend not.
That's why they didn't see an actual ordinance.
But it was on public property that they said no.
They're both.
Anyway.
They discussed and reviewed both of those cases.
Okay. You're sure? Okay, because I heard from a planning commissioner that was upset that this hadn't happened, that they had not seen this, so.
They have not seen the
They have not
ordinance.
seen this ordinance.
'Cause
Okay.
when they said, no, we don't want them, we didn't give them an ordinance saying,
Well-
here's what would happen if you wanted them.
Okay, but here's the problem. We, as a board, agreed that we don't run sign spinners on public property. And we said, we do believe that there's some merit to be considered that signs should be allowed on private property. Some, but we agreed to have staff put something together as a board. And some of us may accept it, and some of us probably will reject it. My intent in asking the board to put something together on private property was two-pronged. One, it is to allow sandwich boards and static signs on private property or not stand in the way as a town should the private property owners, the private non-residential property owners allow it. So if Safeway Marketplace, Safe Rock Creek, whatever it's called, if the owner of that property says, oh yeah, you can put any sign out you want, that we're not standing in the way for any sign, and we don't impose any arbitrary 45 days or whatever. If Juju's wants to put a sandwich board every day out about their specials, I think that's a terrific idea. And then the other alternative was to allow sign spinners only on private, non-residential. So to me, it was two-pronged, and I was a little surprised when he came in with just the sign spinners part of it, because as you read 1970, it does have some restrictions that I wish were not in there. In fact, in application, the more relevant advertising for a small business owner is the sandwich board or the static sign, because there's a cost to a sign spinner. You've got to pay them an hourly rate to be out there for 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day doing it. So that's at a minimum like $100 a day. To do a static sign, to me, is the go-to strategy, with the occasional sign spinner going to pop up. So this whole thing, to me, is a bit out of whack from what the intent was. So I'm with Chris. I would like to make a few modifications in it, and I would like to run a test on it to see exactly what happens before we change the entire code.
Trustee Gregoris.
All right, so I'm probably the minority, and my opinions are well known, so I vehemently oppose your opposition to this. So, but I don't think we should suspend enforcement of something that's written in the books already. I think that's a huge mistake to go down that. I would much rather we either vote it up or down, one way or another. If there's a majority that votes in favor of this, I think it's a great idea to do a pilot run, but we have to do it legally. I don't want to suspend anything that to me, that's just not the way to go. So if we vote yes, we wait until the summer, we get to August, September, we don't see the results that we expected. The businesses are not saying we're getting increased revenue from this, and it's a visual clutter, then we could come back here and vote it down immediately. That's a very easy and simple way to do it, and take it off the books. The gray area, I don't like that gray area. So the one way or another.
Trustee Skumats.
And I don't think the pilot test will give us the results, because I think people will not invest in building or making or buying or whatever the signs for something that they don't know if they'll get to continue. So I don't think it'll tell us what we need, and I just as soon not have the visual clutter.
Trustee Hansen.
My thought about doing the test isn't necessarily to see if it increases the business going into the local business, but it's to see if it's going to be a problem and if it's going to be an eyesore and all that kind of stuff. That's what I want to see. If we go out in the middle in July and we see a dozen sign spinners in Rock Creek Village, then I'd say, that's probably not what we really want as a town. But if there was one or two, one in front of, Great Clips, then, okay, that's not so bad. Because what is that thing, they have that blow-up thing that does its hands?
That Gumby thing?
What is that considered?
That's a blow-up thing.
Think something horrible.
I think that would
It's not that prohibited,
usually
I think.
those are called some sort of moving signs or animated signs, and they're usually, that's what they're called, whether they're allowed or prohibited, that usually they're
Okay.
called one of those two things, and I can look back at your code to figure out where that would
But
fit.
that was the whole point with the test thing, so let's just see what happens.
But to address what you're mentioning, what I'm saying is, we won't. I don't think we'll see 12. If there will be 12 afterwards, I don't think we'll see 12 before, because people won't make the investment, because it's only a temporary moratorium. They don't know if it'll get continued or not. So I don't think we'll ever see if it'll be a problem up front.
Trustee Gregoris.
I'm kind of curious if the Chamber of Commerce has any thoughts. I'd love to put Heather on this.
We'll take public comment for sure. So I just want to make sure.
When the time comes, we'd like to hear from Heather.
Yes. Trustee Cirilli.
Okay, I feel as strongly as Trustee Gregoris does in support of the town staff's position. I've been through so many plan development applications, and, well, not so many. Every one of these we go through and design places, tell them what kind of signs they got to have, do all these things, and then I just can't see crapping it up with sign spinning after all. I just think this is junk. I can't say it any other way. I don't want it in my neighborhood.
Did they bleep that out?
We'll honor the genesis of this request. We didn't dream this up.
I know.
This came from Sears.
We have been contacted by some very legitimate businesses
understand that.
who
That's
say you guys are preventing us from becoming successful.
And I don't believe that's the case.
Well, I think
Sign is the difference.
I think there are ways. And
I think the way to prove that is to do what Chris said, though. Let's give it a chance for 6 months and see what happens. If they say there's no increase in revenue, it made no difference whatsoever, then, and it polluted visually the town, we shoot it down.
So I couldn't agree more with Trustee Cirilli. I mean, I think one sign is too many. I think it's a complete distraction. I think it's, maybe my business savvy is not spot on, but I don't think anybody's driving by Sears, says a sign spinner, and is going to say, well, I'm going to go buy a $1,200 refrigerator now because I saw a spinning sign. I think that's just a bad marketing plan upon a business. So
I bet you if we had the mayor out there with a sign spinner.
it would work. I actually disagree. I think they're probably illegal little 10% off this weekend promotions on private property right now, and sometimes in the public right-of-way are drawing business into Sears. They're somebody who's going there perhaps for something other than that, and they're saying, hey, I've been looking around, why don't I check over here? So I think it's a pretty, that's why I regret that this has been lumped into one thing that is the sign spinner code. It was actually meant to be the signs on private, non-residential property. And if somebody wants to float that Gumby-like thing or put little banners out, at grand opening, that was all to be allowed.
But that brings me back to the plan development and what we go through for those.
The thing is that we'll never know if we don't try.
Yeah.
You'll never know. So that will always remain a mystery to what could have been.
any public comment regarding this particular issue?
All right, Heather.
Hello, I'm Heather Craycraft with the Superior Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Trustee Gregorius, for the opportunity to speak. I'm not sure if I'm going to weigh one direction or another, honestly, because per our discussion at the last time when this was brought up, I have not had due availability of comments from the retail owners in this area, but I guess I'll raise more of a question that is this a place where these businesses should spend their money, or is there a way the town can help them either, one, market, or two, find more ways to directionally point people towards their businesses? One of my strong points is the marketplace and the fact that we don't have a ton of signage for those small business owners unless they choose to pay for that additional expense, and honestly, I'm not sure if it's monthly or if it's a full lease agreement. I think there's more long-term ways we can help these small business owners in pulling whether they be residents, current clients, or new clients towards their businesses, as well as using the availability of town either publications or events to market their business.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public? Oh, no other public.
Well,
Trustee Williams.
You're sitting here.
And those are all great ideas, including the option for the business to have sign spinners or any other kind of sign. In other words, I kind of support allowing businesses to have a range of options and choices in front of them so that they can choose how to run their business and how to be successful. And if we're impeding that, then that's not helpful.
And a range of price points, direct mail, advertising in pamphlets or magazines or whatnot are expensive. We've got a very price-sensitive portion of the commercial population here, and that's small businesses. To put a sandwich board out with the daily special or a new offering, a new product, whatever that may have come in, et cetera, is cheap. It's the one-time cost of the signboard. And then it ratchets up to a higher cost for a sign spinner, et cetera. But we've got a very price-sensitive population here. I want to help them succeed, not fail.
Is it,
Trustee,
oh, sorry.
Trustee Skumatz and then Trustee Gregoros.
And I see this is the difference between us staying like Columbia, Maryland, or ending up looking like Laurel, Maryland.
I don't have a reference point for either.
Oh, I
one,
do,
so-
she's right on.
Well, for those of us that have not been to
A
Maryland,
planned
so.
community with not clutter, and you can't have, huge golden arches or whatever, stuff like that, and Laurel is any techie strip mall that wants to put crap out on the street can do it, and that's what I see.
That's the word crap twice today. That's a very,
I think we have enough retail
I
to
hope
make
that
that
time delay is
happen.
working.
I don't think we have enough retail to be Laurel.
yeah, we don't have enough retail, but that's true. This is not Las Vegas, it's not the Strip. I was wondering if the chamber, was it worth it to do maybe a mini survey to the businesses and see if they were even interested?
Residents.
No, to the
Interested in
business.
doing
Let's
sign
have a survey of
spinners?
the residents.
This is about business.
An interest in doing sign spinners?
No, just to see if they're interested in having that option.
Putting,
I think that would be an overwhelming yes, because the businesses are asking for it now. So I don't think we need to do the study. I think that they're going to ask for it.
So are we business friendly or not?
We are.
We are,
business friendly?
and thus we don't allow sign spinners.
That's the.
Within,
come on, there's a happy medium, guys. It's not.
all right. Citizens.
Yes.
would say no way.
Let's move on.
Well, hold on,
Trustee
before you make
Yes.
the motion.
Yes.
Citizens would say
So,
no.
I mean, I agree with both sides here. I think that we should try it, because I want to see how it works. But I don't necessarily agree that that's the answer to make a business succeed.
Yeah, but we don't know.
Well, I think there's other things to do. I think there's things that we can do, but I think that we should try it. But I don't think we should approve this ordinance as it's written. I think that we should change it to say that we're willing to do a test on this for a certain period of time.
That's not an ordinance. That's.
Well,
I mean,
or whatever, what Sandy recommended, or
I don't recommend that. I tend to agree with Trustee Gregoris that this kind of thing, you don't want to start making exceptions to your code, because even though you're not maybe creating a legal precedent, you're certainly creating a precedent there.
Yeah, I don't want
Suddenly, we're going to not enforce this section of our code for 3 months. So, I mean, my recommendation is that you adopt some sort of ordinance if you want to try it. And again, it would be quite easy to repeal it later.
Yeah.
I understand that requires a code, the codification issue and publication and all that. But I think it's better to do it that way
It's
than
cleaner.
to start making exceptions to your code, just by, on a temporary basis. Again, I'm not saying it's legally prohibited, it's just my recommendation that you don't do it that way.
Okay. Trustee Williams.
Sure you can.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for the Town of Superior Ordinance number 0 dash
Preliminary.
preliminary, Series 2013, an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior amending Section 16-1-70 and Section 16-19-70 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding handheld signs on non-residential property.
Motion by Trustee Williams. Is there a second?
second.
Trustee Henson, further discussion?
Yeah, question. So, if we approve this,
That's preliminary.
when the time comes, if we approve it, and then all of a sudden we see that it just is not what we expected, there's a lot of people out there, it doesn't look right, it's distracting, then we're willing to come back and go through this all again.
Absolutely.
It takes 2 trustees to put it on an agenda.
That's all it takes.
And the other thing, just part of the discussion, this is for private property.
Yes.
So they have to get permission from the property owner as well.
I'm also interested to get Katie's input on this. Did we get her input before? Didn't we?
Yes.
Okay.
And what was it?
It was more towards working with the business owners on a marketing plan and other ways of getting their business name out.
We could still do that, though.
Trustee Pennington?
Okay, so in this 1619-70, it's missing a critical word on the title. Signs on private non-residential property, I think, should be in the title. because non-residential property could mean Colton Trailhead or, some publicly owned space. So I would say private, non-residential property.
Just to explain, the reason it's written that way is because the actual title of 16-19-70 is signs on non-residential property. Because we were amending that specific section that already had a title, that's the reason it's referred to that way.
And there's language in.
Yeah, I see it in there, but why wouldn't it be in the title? Even if we're amending a current thing, we can fix that current thing by putting private in there, which is, I look at an index for my operative keywords, so I would like it in there. When it comes back for second reading, I do believe this is very narrow, and it doesn't address the restrictions on sandwich boards or, as Chris brought up, other methods. So we're leaving those hanging out in the hinterland here, not appropriately dealt with, when I believe it was our intent to deal with them, either up or down, depending on your preference. But to me, it was not intended to be a narrow handheld sign ordinance.
Any other comments?
Yeah, one more. I think that we should either strike number 4 on the duration or add each business in there somehow. So we say that each business can do it 2 days a week, or else just take it out completely.
I
I agree, it's not clear as it's.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
I mean, enforcement's going to be nearly impossible anyways. I mean, I would.
We got
say
Reggie,
take it out.
the enforcer, Reggie.
The number of days, I think, it is going to be impossible to draft and to enforce. So I would suggest if you want to do hours limitations, that's easier to enforce, because if it's after a certain time and somebody's out there, that's pretty
The
easy.
7 to 7 is easier, much easier.
Yeah. And again, 7 to 7, it's up to you all what those times are.
Or 9 to 5 or whatever.
Okay.
Could be.
Yeah,
12
that's-
to 1, before 1 hour of lunch.
7 to 8.
So, we have a motion in a second, unless there's any other critical discussion point.
So we're going to change that, though, for the next
Yes.
reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. All in favor? Hanson, Williams, Gregoris, Pennington, opposed, Sorelli, Skumat, Smuckle. That carries, and we'll see that back around. Hopefully we can have some
It lives
neon
to fight
colors.
another day.
Hopefully we can have some neon colors on it, maybe some flashing
better than it was
lights on
last
it.
year.
Okay, that brings item number 12. Executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations and/or instruct negotiators pursuant to CRS 24-6-402(4)(e), to consider purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of real property pursuant to CRS 24-6-402(4)(a), and to hold a conference with the town's attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24-6-402(4)(b) regarding economic development in the Superior Marketplace and the case of Randall versus Town of Superior. With that, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session by Trustee Sorelli, second by Trustee Hanson. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous, we're in executive session. Thank you.